Hello and welcome to an all-new episode of Anime Brain Freeze. We are, for the final time, your Titanic hosts.
I am John.
Hi, I'm Jacob.
And I'm CC. And when there's just too much cool anime to watch, we've got you covered. Today we have a very special season finale here on our little show that has been a long time coming. Because in this episode we will review the finale of one of the biggest, if not the biggest, anime series of the past decade, Attack on Titan. Since this monumental task is a bit too much for our humble two-man team, we have enlisted the help of our friend Jacob, who, unlike John and I, has also read the manga. Of course, since it's the season finale, we will also give you our picks for best anime of the season, but before all of that, we will tackle a few leftover shows that didn't merit a full review in The Quick and the Dead. So, for the final time, get ready to equip your omnidirectional mobility gear, resist the urge to trample 80% of the world's population, and definitely don't pause the pod. We'll be right back.
Alright, so, got the quick and the dead here before we really get into the thick of things. I got a few things I want to talk about. The first was, I don't remember if I confirmed this when we talked about it in the sneak peek, but boy, the Idolmaster Million Live was,
You sound thrilled.
The CG was not the best it could have been, and it really put me off from it. That's, unless your animation is headed up by Orange, no. And you know what? I'm probably not going to learn my lesson because next season I'm probably going to check out at least an episode of the Idolmaster Shiny Colors and it's being headed up by Polygon Pictures, so it's going to be great.
I mean, you are ensnared by some anime series, anime or franchises that you kind of can't escape from anymore. This being one of them, the other Love Live, I guess, and then...
Love Live has production value, though.
Yeah, okay.
And Idolmaster used to. So when they did this pivot to entirely CG, and it's not good CG, it's like, guys,
like you
don't
said,
Namco, Bandai Namco, don't you think one of your capstone franchises deserves a little better?
The thing is, I don't know if they think that this looks bad.
Yeah, I wonder.
I've always
about
had
that.
the suspicion that outside of Studio Orange, all the other studios feel like, oh, this is so good, this looks so great, and we're doing the best you can do with a CG in a TV series space.
And you know what's funny? Love Live started there, and it's gotten so much better. Like they had people come in and put in the work, like in the original show. Oh God. Even in Sunshine, it was a massive jump up from there. But as it went on, like especially in Superstar and even Johanne the Parhelion, man, it looks so much better. It looks, I would say, it looks like something resembling good now. Maybe not the best, but it's way better than it used to be. So for this to look the way it does is sort of like really disappointing to me. When this franchise hit its high in 2011.
So. I mean, maybe they'll get there again if they get better talent that works specifically on CG. Maybe they will nab someone from Studio Orange. I hope not, because I want that studio to deliver its great works. And we're getting the final season of Beastars soon, so
that's true.
There's that. Everyone, please look forward to this. I've heard rumors of this being this is gonna be insane. So. Definitely looking forward to watching that. But yeah, don't give up hope, I guess. Maybe there will be better looking Idolmaster shows again, but also don't be too disappointed if it never gets there because they can't figure it out.
Well, I mean, like I said, I'll at least glance at Shiny Colors when it releases. But Love Live Superstar Season 3 is coming later this year, so, there's that.
Yes. You will not run out of idol shows, John.
The idol well will not run dry.
No, not anytime soon.
Never. So, speaking of idols and idol-adjacent content, there are two shows that I watched all the way through that were not from fall, but, I had some time in between and was like, Yeah, I guess I'll check these shows out. The first one was the first season of Uma Musume Pretty Derby.
Mm-hmm. Is that an idol show?
Tangentially, yes.
Okay, I didn't know they were singing.
Okay. It is first and foremost a sports show, yes.
You have my attention.
But when you make it to the winner's circle and you're the first place winner in the race, you get to have your big winning live at the end, and you sing a song for the crowd. I guess that's how it also is in the mobile game as well. I don't know. Maybe someday we'll get an English version of the mobile game, Psy Games.
And then the crowd has to vote on your song and say either yay or nay.
Hate that's not a pun, but it's also a pun. But yeah, no, I went into this like, it's gonna be cute, whatever horse girl thing, because it's hard to escape seeing art of any of these characters, and they're all based, all of their names and parts of their appearances are based on like real actual racehorses, so it is rooted in some part of, actual jockeying and racing. So
fucking weird. But I mean,
it is weird. And yet there's this really strong emotional component of the girls seeing each other like racing and striving to be their best and pushing each other to do better. That's like, it's really good.
I mean,
it's actually really good.
I mean, that's all that matters, right? If the emotional component there is there and it's well written, then who cares about the framework unless it's something super skeezy, which it isn't apparently. It's just a weird concept. That's all.
The character who's supposed to be the trainer for the girls starts off a little at first, but you can tell his heart is in the right place and he wants them all to do their best. Like, the main character is this girl's special week, and she transfers into this school, and she's like, I want to become the #1 horse girl in Japan. And it's, does she get there? Of course she does. Mm-hmm. But all the other characters that surround her, like there's Silent Suzuka, who she's part of this rival team. I got to assume that the team names are based off of stars, because the rival team they pronounce it as Regal, but I think it's supposed to be Rigel, because the main character's team is Spica. Suzuka she just wants to run and have fun doing it, and she can't really do that on Team Rigel, so she joins up with Spica and she's able to find her purpose there. There's Goldship, who's just like this goofy prankster who, even when all of the other girls abandon Team Spica before it starts getting reformed, she sticks around with the trainer, and she's like very, in spite of her silliness, she's very loyal to her cause. There's Daiwa, Scarlet, and Vodka, who are like just fiercely at each other's throats, trying to make they're each other's rivals, but they're trying to make each other do their best as well. There's Majiro McQueen, who's like very sort of haughty, very she's the queen of her bloodline, but she realizes that everyone else is also trying to do their best. And then there's Tokai Teo, who's like your typical Genki girl, but she's also chasing after the image of the student council vice president, Simbali Rudolph. And I got to know a lot more about racehorses in watching this show than I could have ever imagined.
Hey, education. Do they explain how this... Are they like mutants or...
Shut up, don't worry about it.
No, I wonder, is everyone in the world just, a horse person, or is...
No, actually.
Okay. So
They don't explain it. They're
just people that are horses in this world.
Yes, and they have horse ears and tails, and they run really, really fast. And there's one silly thing that I noticed in one episode. Special Week is on the phone. Now, think about the position of a horse's ear on its head compared to a human's, right?
Yes.
The phone is larger so that the earpiece stretches up to the top of their head. And it's one of those stupid little details. Like I'm watching it for a second. I'm like, wait a second, why is the phone so? Oh my god, that's why it's so. Oh my god,
They made a
It's such
giant phone gag in 2023 or 2024.
It's such a good attention to detail. The show's from 2018
Oh, there
too.
we go. Still, bringing it back.
It's so good. Oh my god. But yeah, the races in the show are actually are incredibly thrilling too. There's spoilers for a show that's 6 years old at this point. There's a race where Suzuka gets injured, and it's so harrowing to see it play out. Oh my god, dude.
Okay. And it's well animated, right?
The first season was handled by PA Works, so it's really pretty, dude.
Okay, I can imagine.
It looks really good from the first moment to the final, and like I said, getting to know all the girls and seeing all the club points, and I cried so many times watching this show, dude.
I'm glad to hear it. I didn't expect it, especially you getting into a sports anime, but that much. But
I mean, you know me, I've checked out some sports anime.
Yes, I mean,
before.
but just really intensely and getting invested into all the characters and everything. I'm glad to hear that.
This show had the framework of cute girl do thing. Though.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that
but
works.
Yeah, this show was really emotionally enthralling in a way that I didn't expect, and I don't know how that carries on into the second and third season. And I guess there was a special or a movie or something after that. I don't know when we get around to checking those out. Kind of like I don't know when I'll get back to One Piece. I'm sorry.
No problem. Watch what you watch, man. Amount of tears shed, lower or higher than Further Than the Universe?
Maybe not quite as many.
Okay.
But there's still some really hard-hitting moments in there.
See, there's a show I still need to watch, which I haven't done yet. So,
oh man, dude, the ending of that show.
Yes, I'm aware. And for some reason, it still hasn't been spoiled to me. So I maybe should get on that.
Good, I'm glad.
So, I mean, I can imagine where it goes, just in terms of people saying, "Oh, it's a very emotional ending," and what the setup of the story is. But still, it's like, yeah, I still haven't seen that particular clip about this or everything or anyone describing it in detail. So maybe I should get on that before that happens.
There's several moments in Uma Musume that hit true. The one that stuck out to me, and it's probably not the strongest one, but the one that really stuck out to me is one of the other girls, El Condor Pasa, goes to this race in France, and she gets second place. And Special Week is like, oh, she's super thrilled for her, but Pasa is she's so sad, she's so distraught that she couldn't beat this other French horse girl, Broye, I think her name was. And Special Week is like, so, you know, at first she's so excited, but she's so saddened by it. It's like, oh man, you see these girls train so hard, and it's like then to come up short. It's like, oh. But it's still, you know, that is the emotional crux of the show is, you know, these girls doing their best, doing better so that everyone else will do better, so that they can do better. It's just like, you know, this cyclical thing. And it works really well within the framework of the show.
Nice.
Horse girls.
Horse girls.
What was the other show? Speaking of idols, Oshinoko.
Oh, right. Yes, the breakout hit show from... Was that from fall season or was it from summer season?
I think it was spring.
Oh, really? Even further back? Yeah, I don't quite remember.
Let me double check that before I put my foot in my... Yes, it was spring. Right. It was April.
Yeah.
And I kept hearing good things about it, and also couldn't escape art of it as well.
Yeah.
So I was like, screw it, I'm going to sit down and watch it. And I don't think I would have gotten into it if the first episode wasn't like in the format of a movie.
Right. Yes, it was a big like 3-episode premiere thing, like triple length.
Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And it sets up, you know, the rest of the plot perfectly. And I'm not going to lie to you. I still think the initial setup for the story is stupid.
Okay.
doctor and someone else. Ooh, we don't know who it is. Ooh, who could it be? Ooh, it's pretty plain to see who it is. But for the sake of the people who haven't seen it, I'll at least pull back on that. The doctor gets reincarnated as the child of this big popular idol. One of two children, excuse me. And in the intro movie, she quite plainly gets murdered by one of her crazed fans, but we don't know who drove him to do this. And the rest of the show is Ai's son Aqua, who was the doctor in his quote unquote previous life. Imagine getting isekai'd into your own world. Who would ever?
Not in this one, no.
But the story goes on with him trying to figure out who put the hit out on his now mother, and it became a lot more interesting to me when I learned that was, the actual story. I didn't know that was, the heart of the plot. I just knew, this goofy, stupid reincarnation story, and to see Aqua like sort of using his abilities, his acting chops to get through the acting world and find out, who did this
and why
to his mother and why. Yeah, it's like, it's kind of thrilling to watch it play out.
Do you get an actual resolution to that in that season, or is it?
No.
Okay.
The story continues into the second season, which starts this summer.
Oh, well, there you go.
So I kind of started watching it at a good time, so I don't have to wait too long to find out what happened, if it, we find out in that season, or if it keeps going.
Interesting. Yeah, I always glanced at it because the mystery aspect of it was the one thing that piqued my interest, right? But the setup was so ludicrous to me that I was like, I don't know if I want to just take a look at it. And I'm not the biggest Idol show fan, so I was like, maybe
don't blame
later.
You.
Maybe when it's finished and I hear that it stays strong and finishes strong, I will be like, okay, then I will check it out. But it's like, I'm not going to throw my lot in with this now, even though everyone is hyping it up. Or maybe like a childish rebellion reaction thing where it's like, oh, everyone is liking this. Well, then I'm not going to check it out because I am different. No, it's not it. I'm just like, I got so much other stuff to watch. It's just, I wait.
Yeah, I just kind of watched this in between other stuff, and I think I watched it over. It took me a lot longer to get through Musume just because I was busy with work and other things. I think I watched Oshi no Ko in like a week.
Nice.
So it was a wild ride getting there. Like getting over that initial hump, though, I feel like is probably the toughest part. But what happens after really makes it an interesting watch. So I'm looking forward to where it goes and, what happened further on into the story. So I have a little bit less to say about this show, but I still really enjoyed it. And, I want to know what's at the heart of the mystery, man. Because sometimes, I think we've come across this issue before, sometimes it can be really hard to rate a good mystery and to execute on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I hope where this goes has a good payoff, but I'm in it for now.
Yeah. I mean, I'll probably check it out, like I said, when it finishes, but the manga is still running, right?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, so it might take a while, but we'll see. Maybe we'll eventually do a full review on the series then. You never know with anime series that are based on manga that is still running when we'll if and when we'll get a resolution to it in anime form. So who knows? Can't predict the future. But yeah, glad that you're into it.
Yes, and since we mentioned PA Works before, this show is headed up by Doga Kobo, and they are definitely. We've talked about them before, and they do some great work. They're definitely putting their best foot forward with this show, too. So, you'll love to see that as well.
Cool.
But yeah, I think that's it, unless you had some, which I don't believe you do.
Well, not really. Like, don't have anything finished. I recently started listening to a podcast that discusses like the entire series of Hunter x Hunter, like the 2011 version. So I was spurned on to just check that out again. And I'm already deep into one of the later arcs, Greed Island. So I'm like, okay, yeah, this is still a fantastic show. Like Hunter x Hunter, who knew? Holds up. I knew. I love this.
Who could have known that one of Yoshihiro Togashi's works was really good?
Yes, and I'm glad he apparently occasionally still draws chapters of the manga. So maybe we'll. I don't know. I think I've said this before when we did our best of the decade show, because Hunter x Hunter was 2011, so I must have mentioned it there. That I don't need a new anime adaptation of this. I would love one, but also the 2011 anime wraps up in a way where it doesn't resolve everything that is set up by the show, but the main driving force, like the main setup, like what the show starts with which is Gon learning about his dad and then going out into the world, trying to become a hunter like his dad, to learn about him and eventually meet him. That is, spoilers, how the 2011 show ends. Like, he meets his dad and they have a talk and then the show is over. And I'm like, perfect. Kind of like, that's, you wrapped up the story, right? That's where you can end it. There's still a lot of stuff open for the side characters, for Killua, for Leorio, especially for Kurapika, who had one of the most interesting arcs in this and one of the darkest ones. And, you know, some of our main bad guys are not dead yet and whatever. So there's definitely something that can still be done with it. I know Togashi is doing that with the further manga chapters. But it's like, all right, even if we don't get a new adaptation of this, and I'm pretty sure we'll get one once the manga actually is wrapped up at some point. But even if I don't get to see one in my lifetime, it's like, it's fine. This is a really good adaptation. Like, just a few small things that were better in the old version, which I watched first, the 1999 version, I think it is. But this 2011 version is great and it's fun and it's immensely watchable, and it's got at least a kind of complete arc for its main character. So I think a lot of anime don't even get that, especially when they're based on a running manga. So super cool with that. I'm enjoying my second way through this version. I watched the first version, the 99 version, twice. I watched this. Now I'm watching this one for the second time. And I already looking forward to some of the key moments that are still coming up, especially in the Chimera End arc. Some stuff also not, because I know that the fucking narrator will creep up again on me, especially in the later episodes of that arc. But I'll try to keep calm and ignore that person. But I know that one of my favorite moments in anime is also coming up in the very late part of that arc. So I'm enjoying my time again with this show, and I will not fully review it once it's done. I might, if we get another anime adaptation, we're still doing this show at that point, I might then do it and then talk about it more extensively and all the stuff that happened in this version and in the other version. Or if we have a season where there are absolutely no shows to review, all of them are shit, and we don't just have nothing to talk about. Again, maybe then I'll grab this and I'll, hey, I recently rewatched that. But for now, I'm just going through this show again. I'm having a good time. I recommend everyone to watch this. Like, if you like shonen stuff, and especially shonen that breaks with some conventions, right? That is, some of the tropes that are so well known to this point, because, they were maybe populated by someone like Akira Toriyama, whose passing we mentioned in the previous episode. But also, stuff that you see in all other shonen stuff, like in Naruto, in Bleach, in One Piece, or whatever. And Hunter x Hunter brings a lot of that stuff up and then completely does something out of left field, or completely it's like, hey, no, we're not doing that. You know, you remember Yu Yu Hakusho, that kind of still was it's had some stuff where it went against the formula, but it had still, you know, its big tournament arc and everything. Hunter x Hunter is more willing to just do things differently. Like the first tournament, the real tournament we kind of get, that happens in a flashback in the course of one episode. Because Togashi's like, I don't actually care about the specifics. I just care about the outcome, and everything else kind of doesn't matter. It's like,
fair enough.
Yes, it's great. It's like, yeah, of course, you can do that. It's super fun. Why would you have to do like 30 episodes of a tournament? You don't have to do that. No one is forcing you to. So that's super fun. So yeah, there's stuff like that in there, and there's interesting power dynamics, like the whole Nen stuff. At first, when it gets introduced, it's very dry, and you know, learning about all that shit and all the aspects of it and how it works and everything, and the power scaling and all of that stuff. But the more they actually get into how that is used, is super interesting and wild and varied, and there's so many weird freaks and nonsensical and overpowered, but also not characters in this show, and interesting worlds and all that shit. So it's definitely one of the best shonen shows I've ever seen. So if you're in the still after all these years of shonen anime permeating the anime landscape, if you're still in the mood for more shonen and haven't for some reason checked out Hunter x Hunter yet, I definitely recommend you to go with it. You can pick either the 99 version or 2011 version, but the 2011 version covers more stuff of the manga, is mostly better animated. Some directional choices are not as good as in the 99 version, and the 1990 version also has some really good filler in betweens, which is not a sentence you often hear. So
interesting.
Yes, so good character stuff in the fillers and stuff like that. So.
Okay.
But it's not as easily accessible, I think, as the newer version. I think the newer version is on Netflix and a lot of places and everything. So it's more easily to watch than the older version. And it looks better most of the time and is more complete. It just rushes things in certain spaces and leaves out some stuff that I don't understand why they decided to do that. But it's not that big of a problem that I would say it's like an inferior version to the 99 version. Like they each of them have their advances and their detractions. But yeah, I would definitely go, if you don't know anything about it at all, go with the 2011 version. And watch that through. It's a lot of episodes. But
oh yeah, it is. It's actually more than I thought.
Yes,
I thought it was like 100 something. It's almost 150.
Yes, it's. I mean, it's not as much as Dragon Ball or One Piece. God forbid.
Nothing will ever be as much as One Piece
Detective
or
Conan,
Pokemon
maybe.
or Detective Conan.
But also One Piece has a fucking story.
Are you implying Detective Conan doesn't?
Yes, I am.
Shots fired.
I mean, it had a story in the beginning, and then I forgot about it or didn't care. But yeah,
true.
Hunter x Hunter, like with 148 episodes, seems big, but it is pretty manageable if you go at a decent pace. And hey, that if you want to check out the podcast, which is very entertaining, I think it's Media Club Plus. It's like a sub podcast from Friends at the Table. And I've been listening to that for a while now, and they do a good job of just going through the episodes. Most of the people on the show already had seen the show, but they have one guy who is like a Hunter x Hunter virgin, and he's like just this doe-eyed puppy who's like, what is going on? And it's really entertaining. So you see a lot of things from all different viewpoints on this show, and a bunch of different opinions, and hear people react to certain parts of the show. So yeah, very entertaining, both the podcast and the show itself, of course. So yeah, definitely check that out. I will keep on watching this and make my way through it until the very end again, and I'm pretty sure I will have a good time. With that being said, let's move on over to a maybe good time, but probably also not, with our final review for this season, which is actually, I can't believe it, probably the final thing of Attack on Titan. All right, it's finally here. Few people believed it, least of them me. Least of all me. I don't know about you guys, but we started reviewing this series, John, how long ago? I think it was in 2013, right? When we covered the second season and first one together after the second had aired.
Yeah, it's been a minute.
Yeah, so that has been... Jacob, when did you get into it? First of all, hello, Jacob.
Hi. Well, I'll start with it's been 84 years. I got into I definitely got into it, back when it was starting to air with the anime. That's when I got my start in it. I'd seen people, posting pictures of this weird no-skinned face guy peering over a wall, and I'm like, what the heck is up with that? Mm-hmm. And went from there, and it's what a ride.
Yes, absolutely. And have you followed the manga diligently, like as new chapters released, or were you like, oh, just gonna let it pile up a bit and then maybe catch up before a new anime season airs, or how did you proceed through that story?
My history with the manga has been a tale as old as time, in which you get into the anime and you watch the first season, and I would say, a month or 2 or 3 goes by, and the itch just needs to get scratched. And so I would jump in here and there, trying to keep up as best I could. There were lots of gaps where I'd fall off here and there, but keeping up as best I could until the anime comes back up, and then okay, we're good until that stopped again, and then okay, I gotta get back into the manga. I gotta know what's going on.
John, did you at any point, like jump into the manga just to know what's up, or did you resist the itch just like I did?
I wanted to, but a friend of all of ours was like, no, we want to see your reaction when the anime ends. And I was just like, yeah, fine, all right, sure.
Well, I mean, probably better for it, or otherwise we maybe would have a less interesting show now today, because we, have people with slightly different perspectives and how they consume the media. So yeah, that's super interesting. Did any of you at some point believe that this thing, Attack on Titan itself, the monumental epic, would ever get finished? Like, did any of you doubt that at some point? Both the manga and the anime.
Oh no, There's a certain point in time where as we now know, the subject matter of the show jumps forward, and once it got to that point, I knew, okay, they're going to finish this. They're going somewhere with it. It's not just going to be like Lost, where it's mystery piled on top of mystery. They were going somewhere with it. So I personally had faith that Isayama would finish it and see it through to the end.
Interesting. I mean, yeah, you're right. Up until that point, or up until the point of the third season of the anime, so to speak, it was like a lot of mystery baiting with what's in the basement and so on, right? And then at that point, you were like, okay, no, this is the new status quo. This is where we're going. But also, it was such a big change in what had come before that maybe if at any point it was me who at that point said, oh, okay, is this... I mean, I assume he will finish it and this will lead to something and not go on for another long, many chapters or whatever. But it was such a big change there. I was like, okay, we'll see if this actually goes anywhere, because this feels like such a big shift. So, John, I don't know. How about you? Did you have your doubts?
I didn't have doubts that the manga would finish, but I was memeing pretty hard every time they were like, oh, it's the final season part 2. Oh, it's the final season part 3. Like, I cracked a joke about that. I think it was towards the end of part 2 where I was like, well, they've got like 10 chapters left to adapt, and I don't think they're going to be able to cram it into, like, I think there was maybe like 1 or 2 episodes left at that point. And I was like, so I guess season 3 is coming. And sure enough, the next week they announced it, and I was like, oh, look, I was right the whole time.
And I think at some point you made a joke about, oh, well, maybe they're going to do a movie as well. And technically, the 2 specials that we're going to talk about today, because we've talked about, season 1, 2, 3, and then the final season, part 1 and 2. And now we have the final season, final chapters, part 1 and 2. So the thing we're going to talk about today, technically, especially the second one, are little movies, right? Especially, the final chapter thing is like runs almost 1.5 hours and feels like a big scale movie finale to a series, like in everything but the name. Would you agree?
Oh no, yeah, for sure. They were like, let's make this super cinematic, and it sure was.
And we will get to that, but we also haven't talked about the first part of this. So let's maybe get into that first, talking a bit through the plot as we usually do, and then maybe talk about some other things that are on our minds in regards to the finale of this big series. So, how does the first part begin? With kind of a flashback where Eren saves a little boy and then apologizes to him with tears in his eyes. It's just a preamble, basically, to what's going to happen next, because the way the final or the last episode of the final season before this ended was Eren unleashed a rumbling. So all of the titans that were in the walls on Island Paradis around the city were unleashed on the world in apparently ostensibly a mission to basically destroy everything outside the island, so the island inhabitants would be safe from the outside world. So yeah, that was Eren's big plan at this moment. John and I still had our doubts that would be all that there is to it, and I guess we were partially right, and we'll get to that once we get to the final moments of the final chapters. But yeah, that's what we set up, and then we get this flashback to the refugees and everything, and we see that there's some doubt in Eren's eyes. They're tear-filled and everything, and deep down he didn't want to kill these people, but in his eyes, apparently it's the only path forward to everything and the fate that can't be changed, and that definitely gets emphasized by the end there. And Attack on Titan has never pulled any punches, but holy shit, like when the Wall Titans are rampaging through the outer world and trampling everything in their path, that is, I feel, the biggest horror show kind of we've gotten from this series up to this point. Would you agree? Like the sheer amount of destruction and death and the way it is portrayed and everything, like towns, cities, buildings, animals, men, women, children, everything being trampled under the Titans' enormous feet. It's a terrifying massacre. Like that really left an impression on me, and I feel like Mappa did a really good job not pulling any punches here and showing the different facets of agony this is inflicting upon the people.
Oh no, absolutely. The interesting thing that I think that Mappa did with the adaptation is that a lot of the scenes that you saw in that devastation were essentially single panel shots in the manga. You'd get one page of, here's a shot of one of them, someone on fire. Here's a shot of, someone getting trampled. And they expanded that out to the, logical conclusion on either end of what that shot looked like, leading to that point, what the shot looks like, slightly afterwards, giving it a lot more of a visceral feeling than just on the page of the manga, but while still maintaining the visual dread of what the pages were depicting. So that was something that stood out to me, and I have some more thoughts about that later, but we haven't gotten to that part yet.
Okay, interested to hear about it. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I haven't read the manga. John, I haven't either, and I must assume that a lot of what the anime did compared to the manga is like increase the scale in general of kind of everything, like just in terms of the action scenes, of course, right? Mm-hmm. But maybe also certain shots, maybe not tracking shots in the action, but over the landscapes and everything, like making you feel, especially, if you have a big TV or something, feeling like really conveying to the audience there's a scale to certain things. Of course, when it comes to the size of the Titans, when compared to normal people and everything, I would imagine that a lot of that came across as more powerful in the anime at certain points than it did in the manga, ignoring even stuff like maybe the score, which is also gigantic. in, Sawano did its part to make this series iconic. There's no doubt about that. But, also the voice performances and everything, and of course the animation by Wit and MAPPA respectively. So is this a general thing that you would say is part of the manga to anime transition, or did that only really come across in these final chapters?
I mean, I would say that the parts that you mentioned there came together, in their individual forms throughout the entire series. It's just with this final chapters, the stakes had never been higher, and so everything felt all the more bleak in a way that even just facing certain death as it was before didn't quite convey. Where, as far as we knew, the fate of humanity rested on their shoulders, but in this skirmish, it's just them. Whereas in the final chapters, it's all of humanity fighting for its lives, and everything is being bleak. And so, as you said, Sawano's score and the depictions of the scenes from the manga being adapted on the screen, as well as I would say some of the coloring that was done that really helped accentuate some of that bleakness. It all came together in this insane package for the final season that I didn't get the same vibe from the previous seasons as I did here, and I love those previous seasons.
So do I. But yeah, I think I would agree, especially since stuff gets so climactic and grim of all things, right? Like the tone becomes, the tone was dark from the get-go in a way, at least once you realize where the series is going. But it gets substantially darker in the final season, just in terms of the subject matter itself and how the status quo has changed and everything, and the perspective and all that, and the outlook itself. So, yeah, I would...
You could say it served as a grim reminder.
Oh my God, John. I'm going to smack you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that. Anyway, so, but yeah, that massacre, the rumbling itself definitely stood out to me, like in the first couple of moments in the first part of these final chapters. Like the victims of this are also not faceless masses, right? We get reacquainted with some familiar faces we have met in the first parts of the final season, just to see them get squashed, burned, and dismembered like insects. It's a true horror show. So I thought that was super effective and just immediately got me into this. And I was just very lying on my couch, but very tensely lying on my couch. So, yeah, I feel like the show did its job well there. We also at this point get some more insights into how far gone Eren is. We learned that saving the island is not his only motivation for doing this. Like, he and Armin had these grandiose dreams they cooked up in their minds about the freedom of the outside world. And when Eren actually got to witness it firsthand, he was so disillusioned by the ugliness of the outside world, namely its people, that he wanted to wipe it from his mind and the face of the earth. There's more to it than that, especially weird sci-fi shit. And we'll get to that. And we have talked about this before, but it becomes kind of even crazier at the end of the show, of the series. But yeah, as John would have put it, the grim reality of why his friends and family had to die literally crushed his dreams, I would say, and made him go insane, at least to an extent. Let's not forget he's not only crushing the Malayans beneath his heels, but decided to commit complete global genocide, Paradis being the exclusion. That also means refugee, that also means other aliens in parts and stuff like that. Like, he's not really paying attention to that. He's just going forward, which is kind of his modus operandi at this point, I guess, because he can't do anything else for whatever reason. But yeah, that's definitely what's happened in the beginning here. It's a really good opening. It's really impactful. And we meet up with some of our other characters. Annie and Armin have a thing. But I guess at this point, it's not meant to be, as Annie, after her whole existence being one of strife, intends to not be part of the fighting anymore, which I can't blame her for, even though her power would be useful. But, she has this ostensible, at this moment anyway, goodbye with Armin, which is kind of touching and sad. So, and so is her conversation with Reiner, where he finally apologizes for forcing his trauma on her and Bertolt and dragging them along on his mission that kind of started this whole mess. In a way, it didn't, but, it was a big part in it. So yeah, we got some good loose thread wrapping up here, especially from a character perspective, which is always something I appreciated about Isayama's writing in this, and I wonder how much was added to that in the anime, like putting some more bits and pieces here and there, especially when it comes to character conversation and stuff like that. But there is definitely something here that made me feel like, okay, yeah, we're getting into the finale here. Like, there are some character threads and interactions that we had before were finally brought to a close here, and to a satisfying close. Would you agree?
I maybe wouldn't use the word satisfying, but definitely a close that was a definitive end, rather than an ambiguous end.
I mean, satisfying as much in that it was brought up again and addressed instead of just let it hang. Which some series do. So, yeah, satisfaction, we get to that when we get to the end of the series. You will hear that sentence from me a lot today. But there's some parts that might or might not be called satisfactory, and this could be one of them. But at least in terms of actually going into what they set up with the story and with certain character constellations, I feel like they were making an effort in these final chapters to addressing some of the dangling character plot threads or whatever, and where you would have wondered, hey, wait, these characters have come face to face again, so why haven't they talked about this or that, right? And I feel like this happens more often than not that is actually addressed in these final parts. So I appreciated that. And yeah, Armin, still our beacon of hope, I guess, at this point. Unlike Eren, he is still willing to believe there's something more behind each new wall that has manifested itself before them. He still has a hope for a better tomorrow. So, I mean, we need a person like that. And definitely as an antithesis to Eren, I guess. I say Eren tramples everything, but he seems to be out especially to go for, intends to especially go for all military operations of all the nations of the world. He doesn't care who's in between those and Paradis, but that's where he sends the Titans. I think that's what's happening. And he's still trampling a lot of civilians along the way like a monster. And not only is he calling himself that, Armin is calling himself a monster too, because he feels like he is partially responsible for this. Then we get to, at this point in the story, I guess, to John's favorite character, Flog. Mm-hmm. Who, with one final fanatic dipshit act, almost crushes the plan of using an airplane to get to Eren by putting some holes in the fuel tank, which makes it necessary for Hanji to make her final stand to buy the others enough time to repair the plane and get in the air, which was one of the standout moments in the first part of these two final chapter specials. In my opinion, I know how you see it, but I felt like it was like this fantastic, super tense scene accompanied by some of the best action choreography in the show and one of the best songs, Bauklötze, from the season 1 soundtrack. Which I love that they brought that back. I love musical callbacks in climactic action scenes in general, but that was just perfectly executed in my opinion. And yeah. Hanji literally burns herself up in the heat emitted by the Titans, but she fulfills her mission and the others get away. Like, it's this nice bittersweet moment when we see her get reunited with Erwin and her other dead friends in the afterlife, even though that could just be a figment of her imagination in her final moments, who knows. Whatever you want to believe. I also laughed out loud when she made Armin the commander and was like, you're Levi's boss now, so give him some shit. What a legend. Also great is the moment where Levi says goodbye to her the first time. He doesn't call her Four Eyes, but by her real name, I think. That's almost saccharine for Attack on Titan standards, and especially compared to Levi's usual attitude. So I like that whole scene. I thought that was great. It was a really, real cool moment and a fitting send-off for that character. Who was definitely one among my favorites. I don't know about you guys and how you felt about the scene, but please let me know.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, Hanji was, from her first appearance on screen, like, you knew she was just this great character. And, up until her last moments, she was just awesome to have around, which is why I'm glad Floke got his comeuppance. But it's his fault that Hanji died, and even in his death, 100,000 years beyond my own grave, I'll still hate him. I'll absolutely still hate him for absolutely everything he did from his first moment to his final.
He was
Screw Floke. Screw him.
Yeah, I mean he's a shit. And there was a point in the season where I was like, oh, I get where he is coming from, especially his disgust with maybe the executing force or the upper echelon of the military the military government, I guess, on party or whatever, because he was very much, once he learns what the truth is about and everything, he is like so angry that he and his comrades got basically fed into the war machinery for years. And that is the big catalyst for him becoming like the asshole that he becomes, like this narrow-minded follower of Aaron's ideas and being like, no, let's kill everyone else and everyone, just being a diehard Jaegerist and everything. So I get his perspective, but also he's such a shitbag. So
he is.
It's really easy to hate him. So I don't know about Jacob. How about you? How do you feel about Hanji and Floke as characters?
So I think Hanji's arc was an interesting one, because for the first 3 seasons and the first several arcs of the manga, she was in essence a joke character. Always wisecracking, always joking around. Not taking the situation seriously, comic relief. And what was interesting with her arc for me was the tonal shift when she was forced to become the commander of the Scout Corps, because that was the turning point when, for her wisecracks stopped being a comic relief and started to show up more and more as a coping mechanism. Shown, I feel, with when she had that moment with Aaron in prison, and she's trying to play the hard ass with him as he's saying, if there's another way, tell me, and threatening her in return. And she tries to play it off as, him getting fresh with her. But she is stressed. She is stressed that out of everyone, she is who remains. And I think that came through with her sacrifice in the end, deciding this is her time, this is her moment. She tries to make a joke out of it, but there's not really anyone left to hear the punchline, so it kind of comes across as bittersweet. And so I think her finale, as much as I would have loved to see her survive all the way through, I think it was an appropriate time for her to sacrifice. That being said, for Flock, I don't have as strong a feeling about Flock, as much as I want to draw some parallels to a certain Suzaku in Code Geass being the almost a polar opposite and yet parallel to him in a certain way. The bastard you love to hate. But a lot of what Flock did makes sense in the context of the world he was in. I mean, by that point, he knew that, what we learned in the earlier season of the, military muckety mucks were the ones pulling all the strings, and there never really was a aristocracy that was, calling the shots. You have to remember how many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, how many people were killed in that first march to sacrifice people.
Oh, yeah.
That was on the military police. So you've got Flock squaring that circle with understanding that we need a demon. That's his whole thing. We need a demon to lead. And he has decided now, since no one else is, he is that demon. He truly believes what he's going for. And that's kind of been a theme of Attack on Titan, especially towards the end, is that everyone has their perspective that they believe is true, righteous, and just, and they're going to see it through to the end. And for Flock, it wasn't spite. He genuinely believed he was fighting to the last to protect Paradis Island. As much as we hate him, because it's we're not following his story, we're following the protagonist's story. For Flock's story, that was his valiant sacrifice. That was his Hanji moment at the last second. He stopped them. But in the end, he was taken down and trampled under the heel.
You could argue, and I feel like it would also be justified from a character perspective, that there is still some spite mixed in here. Just for past actions of his own government, of course, the outside world and everything, right? But also that, like you said, he maybe considered himself the last option, and also his way, again, like many other people in the show, consider it to be the right way and the only way to get out of this, at least for the people on his on the island, that, you know, his world that he knows, and also do right by maybe some of his friends and comrades that were left, you know, battered, bruised, and dead on the battlefield. So, like I said, I can totally understand, quote unquote, his perspective, but it, of course, like a lot of perspectives from certain characters in the show, a lot of our main characters, there is a, let's say, a willingness, a big willingness on them to be narrow-minded about certain things and just to ignore certain things that are, you know, available to them in regards to being actual information that is out there, and just focusing on what they know and what they see as their right path and nothing else, and not even entertain the thought of anything else, just due to their past experiences and their frustration over it. And also, you know, in the face of potential hopelessness and everything. So I feel like especially with Flock, there's a lot of, you made us go through all this shit, and this is for what? So I'm not necessarily I'm going to make you pay everything, but I'm going to make sure that this will never happen again, and this is the way that I see this will happen. And if I have to trample everyone else, and if I have to make use of a demon like Eren for it, I will. So yeah, I can see that.
Let me jump in. I would have to disagree a little bit, because I would say, remember, his final words were not, "I've stopped you," or anything like that. He was dragged for miles and miles by that boat that he was hooked to, you know, managed to not drown, fired off his random shots, and his last moments basically, you know, said, "Protect the island." He was a true believer to the end. He was not there. I don't think there was spite there. I think for him, he truly believed he was the hero saving his home.
Yeah, I think that is true, but I would also maybe argue, don't have to agree with me there, but I can see the original spark for that, of him putting himself in that role, right, of the savior, was maybe one of spite, at least to a certain extent. I wouldn't say that it has to be true by the end, but I'd say like the initial spark or the initial motivator might also have been one of that. So hard to, maybe I'd have to go back and see what his initial comments were, but I vividly remember his outrage when we had this conversation in the meeting hall after the big reveal and everything, at the end of the third season, I think it was. After, you know, the big attack of the Beast Titan against the town and everything, and Erwin's death. And I think there was this moment of him being like this ball of rage in the face of everything. And I'm not quite sure that he has grown completely past this, but it might be the case. It might have been that he has focused all of his understanding of the situation and of his past regrets and everything in making things better and saving the island, and this being the solution for it. I just say maybe the initial reasoning for that, or the initial spark for that, maybe there was also a bit of spite for what came before he took the reins, technically, here. But yes, very interesting character. Hey, we got more out of Flock than I would have ever expected. So there it is. Yeah, everyone gets on the plane, gets in the air, just because that's the plan. They want to get to Eren, and Armin wants to have a conversation with him, trying to pull him out of his current state of mind. Like, that is at least the idea. They don't know how exactly they want to get that, but that is, in general, the final two parts have a pretty clear track in mind, where it's like, oh, we know where we're going to go with this. And I mean, they have set up a lot of that in the final episodes of the final season. But yeah, this is where we're going, and they're on track for that. And everyone in the plane at this moment comes to an understanding in that they're all kind of the same. We already had parts of that when we had this discussion at the bonfire before they attacked the hangar with the plane and it and everything, or with the boat. And yeah, the chapters that this is happening now, this understanding across all the different factions that we now have the plane with, all the different enemies, like with and friends, with Armin, Connie, John are there, but also Reiner is there. And like adhering to the chapter properly titled Sinners, they recognize it's what they all are to an extent. Especially Connie and John recognize their past to have some commonalities with Reiner's. And in the end, they are ready to accept that what has happened and what they are, and forgive each other, and that they want to save humanity together from Eren, which is a nice thing. And I was glad that that was where this show was going, trying to pulling together and getting over each other's differences and trying to forgive the horrors of the past and just trying to unite against this common bigger foe and helping stop it in whatever way possible. So yeah, I appreciated that moment a lot. It was a very strong character moment again, in my opinion. How did you guys feel about that one?
I felt the plane scene was a nice reprieve. I think largely it was a transition scene. Personally, it definitely has hit the same notes that previous scenes had hit. I wouldn't say it was unnecessary, but the Attack on Titan has typically had these moments post someone's death where they reflect and look forward. And I would say that it's largely an extension of the scene of the bonfire, sort of as you've mentioned, but in essence, a logical transition to what was about to come, where transitioning from, all right, we're approaching the final confrontation. Let's have those last moments, those last setting up the conflicts that still exist between, we're going to, one group wanting to talk to Eren and the other group saying, but will you kill him if you can't? Setting up that still potential, even in the final moments, the final confrontation, that there's still some interpersonal conflict going on, and that they're all on the same side, and they ultimately have different methods they'll take to it, and they're hashing out, is this going to be a problem or not? Because ultimately we have to take him down. So I think it was a neat scene, but more of setting the stakes more than being a last parting of ways between people.
Yeah, and I would say it's a kind of a breather we needed in a positive one. But after, if we would have gone directly from the end of Hanji, which as epic as it was a sad moment. So going directly from that to the final confrontation maybe would have been a bit too much of a double punch. And I feel like having this little breather with some positive, feelings in the middle there with the plane was something that did the pacing of the story good. Don't know if you would agree, but it felt like that was something that definitely worked in the show's favor at that moment in time anyway. I don't know if it wouldn't have been too much if we went from that one big blowout and the fallout from that and then go directly to the battle against Eren. So that's why I appreciate the scene a lot. John, how did you feel about it?
Yeah, I think you're right that there needed to be some time, not just for the characters, but for the viewer to breathe. Because if they had just gone from big action set piece to big action set piece, it probably would have felt a little bit like a little bit much. Like you need to slow it down, even for just a moment, which the scene did pretty well, and had all the character pieces to go along with it. So
yes, and it was not like, which we also had in the past, let's just a sad reminiscing about past days or just being confronted with their own misery or everything. It was a legit kind of coming to an understanding, verbalizing regrets, but also going on a positive path by showing some form of understanding or forgiveness for characters that have been at odds for such a long time and even hated each other. So I feel like that was definitely something I needed in between, because holy shit, after this it's nonsense or non-stop warfare. So Eren, as we've expected and as Reiner assumes, kind of wants to stop them, but also not really. Like, he's controlling, or it seems that's what's happening. It seems like he's controlling Zeke, and Zeke is controlling the other Titans, or the Wall Titans, and he would have the power to control them in a way, but Eren, but he doesn't. And it all kind of gets confirmed when they get dragged into the world of the paths, like the coordinate mind space thing for a while. This thing with the tree and the desert. Everyone who has watched the show know what I'm talking about, but it's this weird place out of time and space where everything of past, present, and future happens at the same time. And that's where at least the Titan wielders can communicate, like through telepathic means, I guess. I don't know if all Eldians can do it or just the Titan wielders.
It's a bit of a pie in the sky ephemeral concept, but it's what it is it's the coordinate. It's what was briefly referred to early on, or I shouldn't say early on, late in season 2, when, as far as we knew of the coordinate, was a means for Eren to control the Titans. What it is that it is kind of this ephemeral concept of this coordinate connects all Eldians, past, present, and future, together through a single point. And it's visualized with that tree, which is kind of the visual theme that pops up throughout the series, even up to and including the ending itself.
Especially there, yeah.
So it's the visualization of that concept of the link that connects all Eldians because of their Titan power.
And we've had some moments in the past. I think the most important ones were when Eren first enters this and has this flashback and revelation to the past of his dad, of Grisha Jäger and everything. And now he uses it to talk to his former comrade and kind of leaves it up to them to either look away or to stop him, but also states that they have to kill him to stop him from walking his path any further. Like, he won't be stopped by anything less. That's what he says. He is exercising his freedom to choose to continue on his path, and it's their freedom to make the decision to stop him. He says that the coming battle will be a clash of convictions. Like, he believes this is the only way to save Paradis after all, and the others beliefs diverging from his must be strong enough to overpower his belief. Otherwise, his will shall not be denied, and he won't be stopped. Although, as we've learned earlier, saving Paradis is not the only reason why he's kind of doing this. Maybe also, saving his friends and dedication to that and everything. But part of it, at least in my eyes, again, maybe a parallel to Flock here, is a bit of a lust for revenge, at least to an extent, and going insane over the cruelty of the world. That is my interpretation of it, at least to an extent. And there is some part of the warpy, timey-wimey shit playing into that where that might object to that. But everyone on Paradis kind of putting the burden on him of finding a way to save their people on him kind of broke him. And I feel like a scene in the very finale of the show kind of confirms that in a way, at least. And the others acknowledge that too before they get to talk to him and apologize. But it's too late at this moment because he's made up his mind, and that's his only way forward. But I feel like the frustration and the anger were always part of Eren's character. First, it was just this narrow-minded anger towards the Titans, and then that later shifted to, of course, Male and the world outside as a general concept. And saving what he loves was the most important thing to him, and everything else had to stand back behind that. And yeah, this is the way this had to turn out, I guess. And we get into more detail about that in the actual finale of the chapters. But at this moment in time, this is what he conveys to his friends, or his former friends ostensibly, that they can't stop him any other way than to kill him, because he's made up his mind, and this is where he's going with this. And Armin and Mikasa are still intent to pull him out of the Titan body and pulling him back from the deep mental abyss he has cast himself into. And I think that speaks for their friendship, that they think they can do that they can pull this off. But judging from how far Eren is gone at this moment and how much he seems to also hate himself for it, I already had my doubts at this moment that they would be able to pull it off. How did you feel about this scene? Like, were you like, oh, okay, this is just a setup for what is coming next, and we need to get a justification in there for them to actually, have this big blowout fight against Eren and him resisting with full force against them in a way? Or was this just an emphasis of what came before? Like, how did you feel in general about this moment?
Well, when I initially came across this moment, reading the manga, catching up in the lead up to the final chapters and the revelations of the end coming up, that moment there, I think was what cemented the theory in my mind as to what was going on. This was the moment that I thought, okay, yeah, he's definitely Lelouching it. This is definitely a Lelouch moment. He's telling them, no, you can't talk your way out of this. You have to kill me. There's no other way but to kill me. Kill me. Kill me. I'm like, oh, this is a Lelouch. He's absolutely pulling a Lelouch. That was, I think, the moment that cemented it for me.
I don't know if that was the moment for me where it cemented it, but John and I definitely had our assumptions for that starting when he went, be part of the Jaegers and everything, and we were like, oh, he's never gonna pull off, do this euthanization plan, so he has a different plan. And if the plan is to, trample the whole world, then the reason for that is he's gonna make himself like the martyr, the sacrifice for the villain for his friends to beat. So that was the assumption anyway. We weren't sure that this would be happening, but there was a very big or a very high chance that this was the trajectory of his character. I can see that being the moment absolutely where this cemented for yourself. I don't know, John, was it the case for you?
I wasn't sure up to that point, but foreshadowing is fun. So at that point I wasn't sure how it was going to end, but I knew for sure it's not going to be a happy ending for Eren, at least.
Yes, that was the thing that was very clear very quickly. Like, Eren will die at the end of this show. There is no way for him to get out of this like unscathed in any way possible. I cannot see any possibility whatsoever where the show lets him live for what he's done and everything, and the way his character is set up from the beginning of the final season onward. So yeah, that was definitely the one that we were absolutely sure about, and I remember that vividly when it was he's absolutely gonna die. But at this moment, at least at the end of the final season, we weren't quite sure if he was just literally really going insane, like completely genocidal on everyone's ass just for the sake of it and for revenge purpose, or if he wanted to, like Jacob put it, Lelouch it. So yeah, that's definitely what he did. And yeah, we, of course, going to go more into that because there's an important conversation that kind of spills that out, because Attack on Titan is never subtle at the end there, where
nope.
where Eren basically confirms this word for word. So we're going to get there. But yeah, before that, we have a final battle on our hands, and that takes place at Fort Salta, the last remaining big military base of the Marleyan Empire. Which is set on a giant mountain, which already seemed to me like an epic enough stage for a series finale. Just the way it looks and everything, and how it's set up and all that stuff. So I was like, yeah, let's fucking go. So that felt appropriate. And we have a couple of interesting moments. Yes, nice to see the Malayan military finally take some responsibility for the shit show that is unfolding before their eyes. Like, the commander even says word by word, we put all our hate on Paradis and created that monster that is now attacking us. We need to work together to break the circle of war, violence, and hatred, which is good. But also there's a moment, especially with that guy, with Müller, by the end, where I'm like, did you already forget what you were saying, brother? That's interesting. But
it's fine, don't worry about it.
Yeah, but it's a nice moment regardless, seeing that being uttered by someone from the Marleyan side, who have, at this point, if you want to exclude certain key characters like Gabi, for example, have been a bit of a, I don't know, single-minded, fuck the party, demons entity, at least to an extent.
So I just want to jump in a little bit here, because this is one of the interesting moments with the manga, is that I feel that moment of him backtracking kind of create the parallel callback to when Eren transformed in front of everyone and Armin had to step forward and, say, I'm a human and and stop the conflict, drawing the full circle, having that happen again. Some of those panels were actually added after the fact. There's what's referred to as the extra pages for the final chapter, and that final moment of conflict was added after the fact, or context was added to it. So that's kind of one of the interesting changes, is that they made it smooth in the anime, whereas in the original manga, it was a little more ambiguous until Isayama said, we're patching it with some more pages here. So I wanted to add that because this was one of those times where when he stepped forward to, say that, I'm Armin, that whole moment was added after the fact.
Okay, interesting. So you're specifically referring to the Müller scene or the earlier scene with Armin?
The later one. The later one.
Okay.
I felt this was the best time to bring that up because that, he's backtracking, now he's pulling a gun on him. Some of that was set up later.
Okay. Yeah, and we'll definitely, okay. That's interesting.
So, whether that was originally intended that he completely backtracks on the moment of introspection or just reflects what Isayama's mindset was in due to some of the backlash that had hit from the final chapter, it's hard to say, but they came from two different places, in my opinion, where one was the hopeful, if we make it out of this alive, we're gonna fix our sins. And then the follow-up was maybe coming from a different mindset.
I mean, the other one of those two is more realistic, I would say. Also more cynical, more fitting for a real world comparison, I would say. So I can see both the versions making sense. But yeah, we'll get to that scene specifically later on. But interesting to know, especially that there was this key difference there in the manga. And how many additional pages were there added by Isayama later on?
I don't remember the exact count. I want to say 10. There were 10 extra pages, but I don't remember for certain if it was 10 or if there were more or fewer.
But they were all included in the anime adaptation.
Yes.
Okay, interesting.
So that's not an insignificant amount to add after the fact, man.
Yep.
So we have that. We also see a nice scene with Reiner's mom, who is the stand-in for the parents who turned their kids into war machines to fuel their own lust for revenge, I guess, and who finally display some open regret over it for once. So that's nice. And we have a nice send-off scene with those two specifically at the end as well, which I really liked, but we'll take a bit until we get to that.
I'm racking my brain. Her things were kind of interspersed with the different parts.
Yeah.
Pretty much her and Annie's father kind of were alternated in the, person in the stands going, I hope they survive. I hope they're okay. Reiner's mom and Annie's dad were just kind of the people in the stands during the tournament arc. That's kind of what role they were filling there. So there was some heartfelt, things being said by her mom, by his mom and by her dad, but it largely was just reminding you, hey, these are the stakes, and weren't really adding too much, in my opinion anyway.
Yeah, I mean, they gave us some emotional ties for some of the characters. So like, hey, there's something that they could return home to, right? For them, there is like a world beyond all of this. There is something which not necessarily increases the stakes because they're already high enough. But it's like, hey, if they get out of this, they have a hope for a future, for somewhat of a loving home and everything. They're not all alone in this world outside of their comrades. So I feel like these emotional ties still existing and there being a possible happy end for these characters is something that you as a viewer might pine for, especially after all the horrors that you've witnessed over the course of the show. So I think it's at least somewhat strong motivator to, for you to get invested in the fight and hope that especially maybe these characters make it out alive. So, and also see that, like, hey, these parents who did some really bad shit to their kids, showing this kind of regret and being like, hey, we fucked up big time here, and we hope we will just get another chance to make it up to them. So I like that. I feel that kind of underlines some of the themes of the show, maybe in regards to what needs to be done to get out of the cycle of violence and everything, like the older generation not putting the burden of old bullshit on the new generation, everything, which has come through at several stages in the show as a thing and as an accusation, maybe from Isayama himself. So I feel like this the parents now acting that way and seeing reason here and not insisting on their old views and everything was a nice moment. So for that, I appreciated it a lot. Yeah, that's where we kind of switch over to part 2. I don't know exactly where the break was here. I just know that part 2 then kind of immediately opens up with the attack on Eren. I think there's one final bit where they land on Eren's body, and that gets repeated in part 2. That's what confused me earlier when I was thinking about it. But yeah, I think they kind of repeat the moments of the finale of part 1 and then repeat that in part 2, where they land on Eren's back and Armin is like, Eren, once I pull you out of there, I'll ask you in what way you think you're actually free, which was like this nice exclamation point and cliffhanger moment at the end of part 1. And that's, I think, what we ended on, if I remember correctly, because I didn't rewatch the part 1 for this review because I had already watched it 2 times.
No, it did in fact end there. They had that brief overlap, which was why I think I made a comment when that first part finished, was interesting that they're ending there because, as I had known at the time, the rest of what was going to be shown was essentially one big giant fight scene. And so part of the concern that I had going into it was, is this going to be The Hobbit Part 3, where I knew that all they had left was the Battle of Five Armies. That was pretty much all that was left. And they were going to make a whole movie out of that. And as we all knew, that movie, you know, if dear listener, you're not familiar with The Hobbit Part 3, it was as bad as it sounds.
Yeah.
So that was my fear going into the final Part 2, was that we're going to get one big long fight scene that would be a visual spectacle, but leave you wondering, why did we have to wait so long to get this?
I mean, that's kind of what we're getting, at least for most of the time, not to take anything away. John, did you have similar fears when we wrapped up part 1? Or were you like excited for, okay, the rest is probably going to be just a big spectacle and that's fine with me as long as they don't drag it out too much and there's enough exciting stuff happening? I mean, this is a shonen anime after all, so it kind of makes sense even with this being a bit more into the seinen territory and everything, and also having a bit more substantial themes and discussions about certain things. It would make sense that it would end on a big action blowout. So did you dread that, or were you like, okay, yeah, I want this?
I feel like I was kind of half and half on it because I knew that it would be some large fraction, certainly not, not anything less than half action set piece stuff. But most of the plot had gotten out of the way up to that point, except for, a couple things here and there. So it was kind of like, yeah, all right, I guess if this is how you're going to do it and drag it out to 100 minutes, sure.
Almost.
If that's how you really feel like doing it.
I don't know how long exactly it was. I think like 1 hour, 20 minutes or something, maybe a bit more.
I don't know, dude. I've said this before. Animation production timelines are weird, and I don't pretend to understand what goes through the heads of a lot of these. Not the people at the studios doing the work. The execs making the decisions that, it needs to be... We need to execute it like this. It was an hour and 24 minutes, by the way. So I was close enough.
Yeah. And I don't know. First of all, to address the comparison with Hobbit 3 and the Five Armies, whatever, I've never been more disengaged from a movie, I think. So I would totally agree with Jacob there. Or at least few movies. But
I want to also throw in there the second Matrix movie. That movie's just one long action scene, and it's like,
yes, you could argue there are some interesting bits here, there, but yeah, the action definitely stands out. I think that movie also, or that franchise itself, despite it having some interesting themes in there, also survives a lot on its visuals and its visual identity and everything. So,
yeah,
I mean,
I'm not gonna lie to you. I didn't watch the third movie or the fourth movie.
I did. I mean, I found all of them interesting to an extent, but that's a different discussion.
That's true. I'm sorry.
No, that's totally fine. That's totally fine. It's always nice to grab other examples and comparisons here and see that. I feel like, and this is going a bit ahead here, but I feel like I didn't mind, or I wasn't dreading this being a pure action spectacle for most of its runtime, because like, hey, if you're gonna do a somewhat movie finish to the series, and you set up the stage the way you did, yeah, please go all out. Like, show me Mappa on a somewhat movie budget, which I believe this maybe was, but show me what you can do with this and put your full action effort into this. Give me the Sabano score, give me the big booming action scenes and everything, the stakes, the dire moments, but also give everyone a standout action moment where it's like where one of my favorite characters or all of them get to shine in one way or another. And please, not just that, give me some substance and good wrap up to the story too, and good character moments where they maybe have to talk about shit. But I was like, yeah, if this is mostly action, I would totally be fine with it, because this is what I kind of expected the ending now to be anyway, because again, this has been an action show a lot of the times, mostly, and that's what it's focused on, a lot of moments. And like I said, the setup as a show in the series kind of fits that. But I also can completely see Jacob's perspective that there was a fear of this them. First of all, us having to wait so long for it, because, you know, also action animation takes a long time and everything, but also this then not having as much substance to it as maybe the previous outings of the series had. And it just being being this big action blowout.
I should also add, there was one other thing that I was dreading / excited for, that I was waiting to see.
And we'll get there.
I just wanted to add that there was one other moment that I was dreading that may have contributed to my generalized feelings of dread / glee, but we'll get there.
I wonder what you could be referring to.
Yes. Yes. See, Jacob had teased us several times before the finale of this show aired that there's a moment in there that might give us some pause. So we were also very excited to come to that to that scene. So
you could say that I was excited to see if a line would be crossed.
Yes, exactly. Yes. God. Okay, so let's get into it. Part 2 starts as explosive as you would want it to. Like I said, they're kind of recapping the final moments of Part 1. Like, Onyan Kopon makes the impossible possible, flying close enough to the Founding Titans so the guys can jump on it, and then the Sabano hits, and then Reiner transforms on beat and just spear tackles the gray clone version of the Beast Titan. It's a hell of an epic start. I was like, yeah, let's fucking go. This is great. This is what I wanted to see. Come on, give it to me. So yeah, that was fun. And Armin immediately gets captured and incapacitated by an Okapi Titan, so that he can turn into the Colossal Titan for now, of course, because he's the most powerful weapon that they have in their arsenal, a literal one. In general, we see a lot of new Titans, or rather old ones, from the previous generations that we haven't seen until now. Maybe teased in certain endings and OPs that we couldn't make any sense of. But yeah, all recreated by the Founding Titans and Warhammer Titans powers and Beast Titan powers. And they are not as resilient as actual Titans, but there are a lot of them. And if I'm not mistaken, they can be resurrected over and over again. So that's the force that our characters now have to deal with. And there's not too much to talk about here in terms of action scenes, because, you know, there are action scenes. Like, there's it's a big action blowout. Everyone gets really well animated moments to shine, which I really wanted to happen. So I was happy about that. Like Pete gets a cool moment. Levi gets several cool moments. Mikasa, John, Connie. There's so many cool action scenes and key moments for these characters where they get to shine that I was really hoping for. It's like, yeah, now if we have these legacy with these characters and this constellation now, let them shine and let them have their big action moments. So I appreciated that. For you guys, did you feel like the show did enough to make these moments riveting enough, or did you feel like it was dragging on too much, just in terms of us giving us this parade of action here? Or were you like, oh no, this is great. This is hitting the right buttons at this moment. How did you feel about this?
Definitely was, kind of the peak of combat, as it were, for the for the series. And I agree, definitely, giving everyone their moments to shine. Though I would say Connie had his moment to shine a lot more in the previous final part. There were no slackers in this final moment. You weren't going to have a sort of Tournament of Power-esque issue where how on earth are these characters surviving until the episode can focus on them? Don't worry about. No, you could tell through what was being shown, through cuts here and there, panning shots. Everyone was pulling their weight. There was no one standing off to the side going, "Gee golly willikers, this sure is rough. Oh man, we're really on the ropes here." And they never seemed to actually do anything. No, everyone was pulling their weight, and definitely you felt it in the action shots here.
I think that's what helped keep it engaging, because if you had X character or Y character standing off to the side like that for even like a brief moment, it would have been like, so what's going on? Why are you here? Why aren't you fighting? Look at the scale of what's going on. You need to be doing something, and everyone sure is doing something at any given time. So I think that's what made this work better than I was expecting it would.
I would totally agree. And it's not like that we're solely focused on this stage, right? We always get glimpses at the outside world on occasion to see what is happening there and how the rumbling progresses and everything. And we get this moment where the Secretary Miller from the Malayan military forces realizes that Party has come to help and wants to support them, which brings about a shift in, allegiances and everything, and how they are seen, like how our forces of good, quote unquote, are seen from their perspective and everything, which was interesting to include, or important to include, in my opinion. So I feel like this was just a good set piece in general and a good stage, and it was it went enough like back and forth and had enough shifts of the tide in it that it didn't get stale at any moment, at least not for me. So it doesn't sound like it did for you guys once until we arrived to the final moments of the show. And I mean, there's several stages to this fight itself, not only on Aaron's back, but later on the ground as well, and so on. And yeah, Aaron gets a bit of help from the founder, Ymir, apparently. He said he is doing nothing but moving forwards in the last part to the characters, and maybe that's true at this point. And all the action that is executed, like the resisting force with the Titans and everything, is handled by Ymir, because she wants to eradicate humanity for her own reasons. And I guess we get into that at the end. Yeah, we'll see. And for that, she needs Aaron to keep going and intervenes accordingly. So that's what happened. We have a bunch of interesting key moments here in confrontations. Like I said, don't want to talk about all of them in detail, but we get like this hilarious moment, this kind of all is lost moment where everyone is like thrown under the, I guess, or in the rib cage of the founding Titan, kinda, and is attacked from all sides. It's like, oh, this is it. This is the all is lost moment. Before Annie hilariously steals the spotlight from Mikasa as she, together with Gabi, rides in on Falco, who lives up to his name by having transformed into an actual flying bird titan. So, yeah, that also made me kind of laugh out loud, because apparently the ship they were on got destroyed when he turned into a titan. So why did he not, like, row out a bit on a little rescue boat and transform there instead? very weird and dumb detail to even mention that. I don't know why they did that. It's like, oh, he's so powerful.
It's fine. Don't worry about it.
So that right there, it's part of what we've seen plenty of times in the series up to this point is the series' ability to have moments of absurd comedy, even in the bleakest of times.
Yes.
You even see it, shortly after this same scene when they're trying to point out what's the Titan that has Armin, and there's this whole moment. Everything's going to shit in the background, and they're like, is that a goat? Is that a bear? It's a cow. What are you talking about? I can't see it. Oh, it just jumped. Things like that. And even then, there's the calling it the Okapipi thing or whatever. In that moment, the Oka thing, I think she said. That those moments, I think, is what made Attack on Titan unique for me, because everything's going to shit. You have this heroic and also symbolic moment of the wings of freedom coming in, and they still have to say, by the way, he kind of blew up our boat when he did this. We had no choice but to come over here.
I totally get that from the perspective, and it makes sense in context of the whole series. And we even get like one of those, or a couple of those funny moments in the final conversation, very important conversation at the end of this show, that I appreciated a lot. But it was just like, okay, I totally get why this is funny, but why did this have to happen though? Like, that Titan transformations can cause havoc, so why would you? Hey, I'm gonna try to transform into a Titan now, and maybe don't do it on the fucking ship. It just made me laugh. It's like, why would you do this? But it was a funny scene, I agree. And it's always great to have these moments of levity in these tense fights, as long as they don't completely undercut the tension, right?
Right.
And I feel like you said, Attack on Titan is first loves to do this, but also is very good at this. Not only giving us that, but also like these out of nowhere moments where the atmosphere completely shifts and everything. What comes to mind is, of course, the revelation that Reiner and Bertolt were like the undercover spies, whatever, the enemy force in the second season that came out of nowhere. And the way it was conveyed in the show was so ludicrous. Like, no other show would ever do, anime would ever do it this way, where it's just happens in a background conversation, kind of.
And that was actually really well adapted for the anime, because in the original manga page, it was a background conversation. You have what Mikasa and Hanji were discussing in the foreground, and literally just off to the side in tiny little bubbles, just in the corner, you have Reiner saying, I'm the Armored Titan, he's the Colossal Titan, and it moves forward from there. They adapted it flawlessly for that. Everyone who had read the manga knew it was depicted as a background conversation. It was not in the forefront. It was not your typical, bass drop, pity your stomach fall out. Oh, this is the big revelation. No, you're reading the manga page and you just see in the background, hang on, wait, what?
And it was like that in the anime too, like you said, they adapted that flawlessly. You listen to the conversation, and that happens on the side conversation. In the side conversation, you are focused on the other conversation of Hanji and so on, and then you're like, you listen, and then wait, what? what did he just say? Backtrack, and then holy fucking shit, what? It was amazing. One of my favorite moments in the show, just the fucking balls on Isayama to reveal it that way. When, everything in regards to shonen tropes would make this big dramatic reveal, and it just being like this instead. I love this. So I always appreciate it when the show or the manga, when in this case, I guess, went in completely against the norm. With what they did with their story. So breaking with conventions and everything and subverting expectations. So Attack on Titan is really good at that. Yes, all of this appreciated, the comedic moments as well. Okay, so at this point, everyone on Falco's back decides they won't get anywhere if they don't kill Eren, which has at least Mikasa stare at all of them in disbelief, which I get it. Saving him was always her biggest motivator, but the others have, of course, a point, and I, at this point, also wouldn't maybe have seen a different way, and so Mikasa is tasked with concentrating on saving Armin while the others try to take down Eren. which is probably the wisest choice, I guess. There is a confrontation between the Eldian refugees that want their injured to be treated and the Marleyan soldiers who want to support the attack on the founding Titan with their cannons. Naturally, nobody trusts anyone and they're ready to shoot each other. And then Secretary Miller intervenes. The show plays a bit coy with that in regards to, we hear gunshots, right? And then, did everyone shoot each other? No, of course not. Otherwise, it would probably been shown. And you would imagine that at this moment he went in and already and was like, we need to stop this and work together, and we need to come to an understanding or whatever, because, the parody forces are now fighting the big bad. So at least that's what I immediately garnered from that. I don't know. Did you feel like the show was successfully doing a red herring here, or was this more like, we know what is happening here? Or how was it framed in the manga anyway?
This scene in particular, I don't actually remember too well in the manga, especially with the stitching together they did with the extra chapters. But ultimately, I felt it was one of those. Once the cutaway happened, I'm like, okay, it's your typical red herring shot. But it did kind of underpin we don't know what is going on or what's going to happen. It was a very chaotic scene that I feel has happened previously in the series. Things like when the female Titan was chasing everyone in the forest way back in season 1, there was while the pacing was off, there was a very chaotic, what the heck is going to happen next feeling in that. And I think that was reflected in these scenes, in that everything's going to hell. There is no, backup plan. There is no, we have extra forces in the form of, those who just flew in, but it's not like there's some greater Deus Ex Machina brewing in the background that we are aware of yet. So I think it was a tone setting that, as the end of the world approaches, everything's going to shit.
Yes, I guess in that sense it did its job. John, how did you feel about this?
From the moment they cut away, I was like, come on, guys. Come on. Come on. It didn't get me for a second.
Okay.
Like, sometimes I get surprised by this show, and then with this one, it was like,
But maybe that was also not the intent. Maybe, it's like Jacob said, it's like, it was just going for the chaotic thing, and like, hey, everything is going to shit, and everything is dangling on a thin thread, and maybe everything will turn to dust in front of our eyes or whatever, and all our efforts are in vain. So yeah, I guess in that sense it works. We have poor Armin yelling at his own body, calling it a useless piece of shit, since he's drowning in despair and frustration due to not being able to make use of his second lease on life he has been given to help his friends. To accompany this being another all is lost moment, all going down into chaos, we see a bit more imagery of the rumbling Titan squashing whole countries and the people living there under their feet. A reminder between all the climactic action, the most that is happening. The most striking image probably being a bunch of people cornered at a cliff and just putting each other off it. A mother tumbling, like falling to her death, but her child getting rescued, like everything in black and white, only the child or its blanket is in red color and everything, and being handed over the crowd to save it. Very, very striking image.
So
yeah,
to jump in, because this was another moment where they remixed how the manga was to heighten the tension in the series, the animation of it. Because those scenes in the manga were very similar to what we spoke about earlier, with taking single frame shots and developing an entire scene out of it. Where earlier, when the rumbling had started, we got that this is actually a similar situation where they took shots that were just kind of interspersed and used it to really build the tension of what was going on. These were not entirely fully dedicated scenes. These were, look, it's not, the fight's not only here, everyone's dying everywhere. And they remix it very slightly, but I would say very, very well, to great effect.
Definitely. It works perfectly in this moment. And I think they did a good job of making use of it here. Armin realizes he is able to see all of this outside stuff because he is connected to the other aliens through the so-called paths that connect them. You know, the coordinate stuff. And once he realizes that he is able to move his consciousness to that shared place in the desert with the tree and everything, he meets Zeke there. And they have a little discussion. And we get some insight into at least Zeke's perspective on the whole thing and what happened here. He assumes that Ymir created this world of paths with that eternal tree in the middle and the Titans to escape from death. They have a little discussion about the meaning of life. And Zeke, at this point, having already resigned himself to death being inevitable and life just being a never-ending cascade of fear and having no meaning beyond multiplying and everything. And Armin poses that the little moments in his life, like running up a hill with his friends on a nice late summer day, are what matter. Like these little moments and memories of joy, how insignificant they might seem from the outside, are what gives life meaning in his eyes. And the show visualizes this in an interesting way by having him pick up a leaf from the sand that symbolizes the memory of the day of hanging out with his friends he just described. But Zeke doesn't see Armin holding a leaf. What does he see instead? Well, a baseball, of course, because playing catch with his surrogate dad, Xaver, was that for him. Those were the little moments that gave his life joy and meaning, so much so that he incorporated that into his Titans attacks, actually. So, yeah, that was really interesting. Also, that realization leads Zeke to ask some of the previous Titan wielders who were comrades of Zeke and Armin, respectively, or their souls, to help them in the fight. Bertolt, for example, Porco, Marcel, our Ymir, not the founder. So it becomes an all-out Titan team battle. Nice moment of Zeke thanking Grisha Jäger, who he had only shown pure hatred for until now, for giving him his life so that he was at least able to have these moments and memories of joy playing ball with Xaver. What did you think about this moment? Was this like, oh, we get a nice moment with Zeke of all people? That's that's cool. Or we're like, okay, this didn't do anything for me.
I think it was, let me start with, I think it was a good scene, but it was also, there's been, I would say, some trends coming out from Japan in some of its media. And previous ones, you've had a lot of family building ones due to, issues with the birth rate. The interesting one I've been seeing coming out lately is dealing with nihilism. There's another property that John and I have participated in that has dealt with this, and it was also interesting to see Attack on Titan dealing with the feelings of nihilism, of nothing has a purpose, nothing is meaningful outside of what we build from it. And to see that reflected in Attack on Titan was an interesting one, because it did tie into the previous issue of reproduction and all that, in that, life has meaning, not intrinsically, but extrinsically in what we do with it. And so I think, while not the most deep or meaningful take on the subject matter, it was definitely an interesting perspective to see in a otherwise bleak show. And to also further go into it a little bit more with, bringing in how he brought in the other Titan wielders. I don't think it was the most unique take on this. It's kind of a tried and true trope of our friends, past and present, our strength. And so, well, again, appreciate it, but maybe not the most unique take on things. But, you're coming up on the finale. It's not really the time for striking out onto a untread path. You need to stick the landing.
Agreed. And just especially concerning the nihilism part and everything, and life getting meaning through what you make of it and everything, and not having meaning intrinsically. I feel like the series has somewhat conveyed this from the get-go, with all the focus being on how much our three main characters, Armin, Mikasa, and Eren, mean to each other. I always wish there was more on Mikasa's side of things to this, because she is mainly the muscle, right? And her thoughts are not verbalized that often in the show. That was always one of my big hang-ups in this. And she's mainly there to, look after Eren and everything. And that's her role. And we don't get her, a point of view from her beyond that often. But I feel like the bonds between those three characters and the bonds between other characters as well was always there was always a big focus put on that, and especially the nostalgia for what Eren and Armin and Mikasa did in their childhood before all of this happened, and their dreams for the future, and going to the outside world, seeing the sea and everything. There was always like put a big focus on that being what made their lives beautiful and gave them meaning and everything. So this feels like a natural evolution and exclamation point to that specifically, to those themes specifically. And that gets, I guess, repeated at the very end of the show, which we'll get to that, but it's very cynical and also very nihilistic. But you could argue that, hey, if you focus on what Armin says here, what Zeke says here, the main message of the show is always that this is what it comes down to, and fill your life with meaning, because otherwise it might lack some. So I feel like this wasn't misplaced or anything. And yeah, like you said, it's not a super deep thing or examination of it, a deep examination of it, but I feel it was handled well and also didn't come out of nowhere, because it was always present in the show from the beginning.
Well, I think let me push back a little bit on something you brought up there, and we'll jump forward a little bit with this. You brought up Mikasa's side of this, and that I think her particular issue, her motivations were pretty apparent on their face. She loved Eren, and everything she did was for Eren. There wasn't really much deviation for that. And so we'd end up throughout the series, didn't see too much of that outside of some cute or silly hints of her getting jealous of Historia, spending time with Eren, or, things like that. But it was, what was interesting is that her arc was about her inability to verbalize her feelings, to the point that, to jump forward a little bit, we get to see a little a glimpse of a timeline in which, at a key moment, when Eren asks, "When am I to you, family or something else?" In our main timeline, she answered family, and things progressed from there. But we got a glimpse into a timeline of her saying and admitting her true feelings, and everything went differently from there. Things obviously, the world was ending, for the Paradise was being invaded because the Rembling never occurred. But we got to see what happened had she finally accepted her, what she felt before everything went down the dark path. And I think, that kind of just, maybe it wasn't an artful depiction or even a meaningful depiction, but I think that was important for, kind of underlining that this was her motivation through things was, it was Eren. Is it simple? Yes. Was it very complex? No, not at all. But the motivation was there. She just could not verbalize it. And so I think it was shown, but there wasn't much to show.
Yes, that's true. Her arc was up to a moment very straightforward. And I guess what I wanted from it was that there would be a bit of a deviation from, her general status quo as Eren's love interest, as his, at some points, maybe protector, big sister, whatever, right? And having just a bit more interesting conversation that included her as a speaking part. But like you said, yeah, that's also part of her arc, that she just had issues verbalizing the stuff that is most important to her, and getting to that point where that happens, but too late, is also, of course, a very sad thing. And that we see that, especially that we are like tortured with seeing the alternative, right? Where it's like, oh, this is what could have been. And then, I don't even know if it's like, it feels like it's a bit cruel, because I must assume she's, the way that scene is put, and yeah, we're jumping ahead here, but now that we're at it, I want to also talk about it. It feels like she is also seeing that alternative reality, that this what could have been thing, that this is where things could have done. And like, putting that on her and being the show or the writer, whatever, being like, hey, if you had spoken up, like if you had opened your mouth, things would have turned out differently. Feels a bit cruel. Like, I don't know if I'm super okay with that. Being like, hey, this was not this was all on you, but you played a pivotal part in this after all. And because you weren't able to make your voice heard, when we weren't able to turn things around. You were the key factor in this. And putting this all on her, I don't know. This felt a bit. Hang-ups here.
There's some greater context for that because there are bits and pieces that were thrown here that were added in the extra pages that you can't. Unfortunately, you cannot avoid the extra pages that came in here. In that portion of it, you have to remember wasn't just like a magic her reminiscing. These were the implications. The starts of the implications as they later cemented near the end. Well, I shouldn't say cemented because it was still not really represented very well, even though this is what actually happened, but that her headaches and all of that kind of thing were driven by Ymir, the original Ymir, and her, desire to fix things and her weird issue with King Fritz. We could go on and on about the subtext with that, but that ultimately a lot of what she was shown there was Ymir kind of giving her that vision of things.
Pushing her into a certain direction. For a specific reason, which we will also get to at the end, but yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, of course. It's just, at that moment specifically, I was like, the way the show is phrasing this right now as of this very moment, especially when contrasted with what Eren is saying in his conversation with Armin later on, it felt a bit, I don't know. I wouldn't say, maybe mean, especially in regards to, how Mikasa has been just this diehard for my friends, for my love, whatever, I will do everything person. Mirrors Ymir in a way, but also it's just like, hey, she has always been such a linchpin of good in a way in this show, at least when it comes to our trio of main characters, that it felt like a bit of a mean jab at her that I didn't necessarily appreciate, because a lot of shit that is going on, might be on Ymir, a lot of that shit is on Eren, especially, and, of other outside forces. But at this moment, it also felt like the show was being like, hey, this is also a bit on you. And I was like, I don't know if I agree with that. So maybe that is how I interpreted it at that moment. And that is just how it came across for me. But and that wasn't the intention, but it felt a bit like that. So I was like, that was one of the moments in the finale where I was a bit taken aback and was not super happy with how it was tackled. But I get maybe what the intention was here and how that came to be anyway. And like I said, maybe I'm just misinterpreting things, which happens a lot. So don't worry about it. But getting back to our battle that is still going on with the other Titans distracted by, now all the previous Titan wielders taking over their bodies again and everything, and just having this big old battle royale thing going on, Gabi and Mikasa are able to free Armin from the Okapi Titan's grasp, and Zeke intentionally reveals his real body to the others so Levi can cut off his head, which he of course immediately does, which stops the rumbling Titans in their tracks. So we have this neat visual device here of bringing back the color to the scene with the people at the cliff who are now ostensibly saved. It was a really cool visual thing they did in the show that I appreciated. Jean gets a showcase moment. Fuck yeah to that, because he's one of my favorite characters. And he blows up Eren's neck. And we see that weird alien centipede thing that is the ostensible source of the Titan power. That tries to get a hold of Eren's head again, which then is stopped by Reiner, and Armin transforms into the Colossal Titan, which of course unleashes a gigantic atomic explosion. And that imagery is played in conjunction with the imagery of Historia giving birth, which is a choice, but okay. One of the ultimate symbols of death juxtaposed with one of the ultimate symbols of life. Sure, Attack on Titan has never been subtle about anything, so that tracks.
Subtlety is for cowards.
Yes, absolutely. Subtlety and subtext are for cowards.
I've known writers who use subtext, and they're all cowards.
Absolutely. But yeah, we get this, then due to this, we get this brief pause because we think, okay, Armin's transformation like exploded the centipede thing and also Eren and whatever. And we see Gabi, Falco, and Peak being reunited with their parents, which is nice. Annie too. Sadly, the blast didn't take out the slimy centipede thing, and Eren resurrects in a mixed colossal attack titan body. That's what it looks like anyway.
Yep.
Which was cool. Like having that and then have him and Armin going toe-to-toe. The centipede unleashes gas that transforms all Eldians into mindless titans against their will, so it can use them as an army. Well, except the Archimans and Titan wielders, of course, because they're immune to that. We get this nice moment of Jean and Connie standing arm in arm, reminiscing about the past before they get transformed as well. But yeah, that was a neat moment, and at that point I was already pretty clear or hopeful that this wouldn't stay that way, right? That they wouldn't stay that way, because we were always assuming, okay, what is the ultimate solution to all of this? Is the show at some point just gonna switch to live action? It's Isayama drinking a cup of tea, then shrugging, and then just standing up, leaving his table, and then the show ends? Or are we gonna see something like, hey, everyone is gonna lose their Titan powers in a way. Everyone is gonna be turned to human. So at this moment, we're like, okay, this is probably where we're going, but we need another all is lost moment. So this is where the show is going with this. We see Mikasa retreat into the alternate reality that we were just talking about, where everything played out differently, where they ran away together before Eren was able to do a genocide, which definitely would have been the better choice, probably, but also, again, putting it all on her, if that was what actually was happening here, or not all on her, but a bit on that. Didn't feel right to me, but I already talked about this. Jacob, you said that Ymir is probably giving that vision to her, but it's also probably maybe Eren speaking to her through that fantasy, telling her to let him go, aka to kill him.
It's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. Mm-hmm. This is where things get a little artful, and the ending starts to fall apart a little bit at the seams. But that's essentially what it is Ymir's giving him a message. It's also a message / memory of Eren, telling her, his little part of let me go. And it's meant to be as much of a dream sequence as it feels.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the idea is for Mikasa, or the message she is supposed to get with this is, I mean, he says this in the dream scene, right? Like to forget about him, live her life without him, which she is not fully willing to do yet, completely anyway. But we get this one final amazing assault on Eren. This amazing maneuver gear tracking shot in a show that had so many incredible ones, where Levi and Mikasa rush toward him, toward his Titan body. Levi blasts a hole in the Titan's teeth, and Mikasa swings in and cuts off Eren's head. And that was kind of the last action moment of this show, because then we see Eren and Armin having one final conversation. And this is where we get the final confirmation that Eren was Lelouching it, like we had already assumed, and making himself the villain and a martyr to unite all the people in the world against him, and putting up a bit of an act by fighting his friends in earnest, thus turning them into world-saving heroes and showing the people of Marley that the devils from Paradis could actually be allies and vice versa, focusing all the fear and anger about Titans on him, only to create with his death the possibility of a dialogue and peace. But aside from that, we get some more, I guess, and this is also what Jacob just said, where it becomes a bit artful and maybe complicated and bursting at the seams and whatever, like where Eren explained why he was doing what he was doing and how that kind of came about. Like he moved forward in his path to trigger ostensibly the moment of Mikasa doing something that would free the founder Ymir from her self-imposed mental shackles to the will of the original King Fritz, or her love for him, and thus breaking the eternal curse of the Titans by removing the Titan powers from everyone. And he knew that there was a chance of this happening if he went down this road, but he didn't exactly know what he had to do and what would lead to this desired outcome specifically. Quite the gamble, in my opinion, especially considering how many people died because of this. It's still at the end, even at the end of the show, it's not entirely clear to me what exactly Mikasa did. Maybe being able to kill and let go of Eren, even though she loved him, because that's what Ymir wasn't able to do with Fritz. So she needed someone she was connected to show her how to do that. I don't know. That is an interpretation, a read, but I'm not sure. What do you guys think about that?
You more or less, I feel, got it there. This is, like I said, this is the parts where the ending started to fall apart at the seams and touched on some subjects that I feel Isayama was not equipped to handle. And the interesting part, I think, with here is, one, now that we've gotten to this scene, this is where, with the line that I was referring to, where in the original manga, as some may know, but some may not know, there was a line in which Armin says, thank you, Eren. Thank you for becoming a mass murderer for our sake. Mm-hmm. And that did not and does not play very well for obvious reasons.
Of course.
Up to and including getting memed on with having Albert Einstein say the line to Hitler in one parody.
Oh, no.
So, that obviously doesn't play very well. So they changed it. They changed it around a bit. But I feel that there was a bit of what may have been meta commentary here, in that what was part of what was changed for the anime was Eren starts talking about how through paths he explored countless different, ways that this could have gone down. Similar to Doctor Strange in Infinity War and Endgame, seeing every possible ending, and there's only one timeline that they succeed. Eren got through a similar thing, but in what may have been a piece of meta commentary from Isayama is Eren said, I'm too much of an idiot. This was the only way I could find to go forward, which could have been an admission from Isayama saying, I couldn't figure out a better way to end this than this. I'm sorry, I'm an idiot.
Absolutely could be the case. But,
God,
it's kind of going to the thing John and I were cooking up where he just stands up and shrugs, right? It's
right.
Like, sorry, guys. I can't, which is funny, but I feel like it's also sadly accurate in a way to Eren's character, the format of shonen anime and manga, like at least a solid comment on that, as well as the real world to an extent. I mean, Eren has been that guy from the beginning. Mr. Narrow-minded teenage angst with tunnel vision, only seeing violence and death as the solution to everything. So how could it have played out any differently with all of this resting on the shoulders of a guy like that? Which is not freeing him from the responsibility of his actions, and I don't think the series tries to do that. It is, however, trying to evoke empathy for, when it comes down to it, genocidal monster. How did you feel about the show maybe trying to do that? Did you feel like the time we spent with Eren and the other characters over these years justifies feeling sorry for the guy, or do you think the series going with the general plea for empathy for any human, which is, I believe, one of its core themes, is going a bit too far here?
Well, so in Eren's case, it's an interesting situation that I felt, because the show's theme, by and large, one of them anyway, was freedom. And the ultimate point that was made with what Eren was going down is that despite him chasing freedom, he never obtained freedom until he was killed and no longer needed to walk down that path. Now, whether that's a good message, we can go back and forth plenty on that. But I think it stuck to the themes it was trying to do. I just don't think it did it particularly well, but it also wasn't offensively bad in the anime like it was in the manga, which some people were genuinely offended by it because it kind of assassinated Armin's character of being the goody paladin who forced himself to be a demon, at the very end goes, oh, with a tear in his eye, oh, thank you for killing 80% of humanity.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so heartfelt. The change of having him be genuinely horrified and we're going to go to hell together, I feel was a good compromise in not completely upending the ending, but also recontextualizing it in a way that doesn't destroy Armin's character at its core.
Yes, we can be very grateful for that, I think, because of course Armin is one of the favorite characters, at least for me. I wonder who decided to make that change. If it was Isayama himself after the blowback, or if the editors or the people who were handling the anime were saying like, no, we're not going to put this in here. We have to take this out. Please think of a way to make this less problematic. So I don't know if there was any word on that. Who made the final decision on making these changes? Do you know?
I think some of that is to be a fly on the wall situation where we'll never ultimately know who truly made the call. Mm-hmm. But after the chapter hit, the final chapter hit, and all the blowback happened, and even with the extra pages, more blowback happening, there's been a common theme of Isayama apologizing for the ending and apologizing for disappointing people, and even in some of his Western convention appearances, thanking people for being so nice to him and whatnot. I think he feels that he failed with the ending. And so my personal belief is that a lot of the changes were, I think maybe, the directors and the writers going, you're changing this, right? And he goes, yes, here's the changes I'm making.
I'm glad someone asked. So, yeah. No, I don't know. I probably would have burned my my PC or something if that was the ending we got, or if that was still in there in the anime, or at least would have I don't know, made a spit take or something like that was coming without knowing me, and then having this moment that would have completely assassinated Armin's character. I mean, I would have probably still tried to justify it for a while, and man, he's just happy that Eren is taking a load off his shoulders or whatever. But good Lord, that would have been problematic. John, I assume you're also happy that they changed that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that changed. I don't really think it makes everything else around the ending better, though. Okay.
Do you want to get into that now, or I will ask your general thoughts about the ending and about the series as a whole later. So
maybe when we get to that.
Okay. So, yeah, because we still got a bit of stuff to wrap up. We get a bit more timey-wimey stuff here that is... Okay, we get like this one final twist where, originally the grinning titan, Grisha Jaeger's former wife, was going for Bertolt, but since Bertolt was necessary for this final outcome to happen, Bertolt had to stay alive, so Eren from the future sent the grinning titan towards his mom instead. Jesus fucking Christ, or at least he sent the Titan into that direction. It's not clear if he intended it to go actually for his mom to complete the circle, or if that was just a side effect of him leading it away from Bertolt.
He did.
Okay.
He did. I believe, I don't exactly remember the lines, but one of the lines he straight up says he sent Dinah's Titan at his mom because that was the only path there was to get them to this point.
Okay, I wasn't quite sure about that because it sounded in the anime it says like it was going for Bertolt, but we needed Bertolt, so I led it away, and it sounded like either I wasn't sure if it was intentionally for his mom or by leading it away it just ran into his mom and that shit happened and he didn't know how to change it.
I think the line was he led it away from Bertolt and then he says and to.
Yeah.
And
that's
it kind of
right. And we see the scene of his mom getting eaten. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, also Eren is definitely an unreliable narrator at this point, in my opinion, because in the world of the past.
That's an understatement.
Yes. I mean, here in the world, in this coordinate world, past, present, future are all the same. All happen at the same time, and he has spent so much time there that his mind can't quite parse the whole timeline mess anymore and when what exactly happened and how. So I wouldn't necessarily rely on him even correctly recalling what he did and when he did it and why he did it at this moment. At least the show tries to paint it that way. I don't know if it does that to lift some of the blame for it or to explain the more wonky aspects of this time travel shit. Maybe both. But yeah, he definitely can not be entirely trusted, in my opinion, with what he's saying in this moment. Because it turns out Eren and Armin had this conversation actually quite a while ago, and Eren just erased Armin's memory until the time when Armin fulfilled his mission. And Eren did that with every one of his friends, apparently, because now they all remember these conversations, each and everyone kind of getting their own personal goodbye from him, which is kind of nice, I guess. But we also don't hear like all of these words to them personally. We just see their reactions to it. Reiner reuniting with his shitty mom actually made me tear up, I gotta say. That was just a nice moment. That I don't know why that worked for me so well. Maybe because it was like this reconciliation, everything, at least with these two characters. And I don't know, it just worked for me. And then we had like this thing that Jacob mentioned earlier, or where he mentioned that was from the additional chapters or from the additional pages, which I didn't know, but it felt so cynical and appropriate to me that Müller immediately considers going back on his earlier statements of working together and instead is holding the aliens at gunpoint, asking them if they're still Titans. Like, that shouldn't matter. That's the point. The default perception shouldn't be that they want to kill you because they're different. Someone in the final moments of the show speaks on that in regards to irrational fear being a catalyst for the cycle as well. But Jacob, you already said that this was probably included to have this full circle moment with Armin, then having his speech. Right. And
it's lost to time somewhat at this point. I don't know what's true or what's not anymore. There were bits and pieces added here and there between Armin, presenting himself, and Mikasa walking off with Eren's head, and encountering Ymir along the way that were added after the fact. And in fact, the entire credit sequence ending was added after the fact.
Oh, interesting.
So we'll get there briefly in short order, but that little credit sequence was also added after the fact.
Okay, so yeah, before that, let's quickly talk about. I mean, I already mentioned this, that this would probably be the solution, but let's get to it. The ultimate solution to this whole debacle Isayama came up with is, after all, eradicating the power of Titans from this world. I mean, under circumstances, that was probably the best solution we could hope for. But that solution comes with its own issues, especially considering how Titans have been used in the show as a metaphor. Titans, and by proxy aliens, as a metaphor, are complicated for several reasons, but also because the show uses them synonymously for nuclear weapons, but also as the other, as people who are victims of racism and xenophobia. So a world without Titans on the one hand as well, because if you read it in one way, that means a world without world-ending weapons and strife, I guess, at least in that regard, which is good. But if you read it in the other way, it means getting rid of people who are different, which is arguably a problematic statement. As many commonalities as this might share with a giant robot show, which it does, it's still very different in specifically that regard, in my opinion. Like in a Gundam show, you can just pull the pilot out of the cockpit or destroy all Gundams and be done with it, which is how, spoilers, Witch from Mercury kind of solved its central conflict. But you can separate aliens from their Titan power without taking a part of their, I guess at least for a long time, biological identity away from them, even though that was also introduced to them by an external force. Staying with the medium of comics and animation, this is more of an X-Men situation, I feel like, and what Attack on Titan is doing here at the end is going with the solution one of the bad guys in the X-Men comic and the third movie had, and says, well, we'll just take that power away from them without asking. Now, being a Titan is slightly different from that again, because aside from being a weapon, it has few benefits to the user. Quite the contrary, it shortens their lifespan by a lot. But there might still be some Titan users who'd go, hey, sorry, I like the power to recover from basically every injury, and on occasion taking a stroll at the beach as a giant hulking monster, as I was born with it. So how dare you take that away from me just because you're afraid of it?
Well, I think It's important to remember, though, that the only ones who got those benefits were the ones that had the power of the main Titans.
The nine Titans.
The nine
from
Titans that were split off from Ymir and Ymir's children who consumed her. Those Titan forms are the only ones who could use that, but all of Eldia and all of the Eldians were cursed with, if they came into contact with spinal fluid of an Eldian, whatever that case may be, they would transform into a mindless, hungry, all-consuming Titan that its only function and existence is to eat, hoping to find one of those Titans and turn back into a human. And so it was very much a curse. And I get the perspective of, it's something that made them unique, but it was in the context of the show, it was very much a curse. There was no upside unless you were a Titan shifter. All the others were, if you shifted, that was it. You are now this mindless eating machine hoping to turn back. Our Ymir, the one that disappeared from the show somewhat early on, described it as she felt she was in a nightmare for 50 years. So that's kind of, there's some of that in the background that, in the context of the show, removing the Titans were seen as an overall force, an overall change for good, because there's no longer the threat and there's no longer the curse.
Yeah.
Now, if you were to draw real world parallels to that, then it gets a little problematic, but so does anything else once you start hitching real world parallels to things.
Yeah, the problem is that Attack of Titans, especially when compared to a lot of other shows, especially and anime and everything, invites that comparison, right? Because it's drawing, especially in its imagery, so many real world parallels. So you can't not, even into these small moments, be like, okay, wait a minute, what are you saying here when we talk about the real world comparisons and symbolism here? So it's a minor thing, and it's not even nearly as bad as the euthanization plan Z came up with.
It tried to straddle a very fine line on a unicycle, and man, it tripped every step of the way.
Very, very, very good way to put it. And the show has been doing that on several occasions, and I get to that in a later point I want to make. But yeah, it still has a somewhat iffy stench to it, but it's like, okay, I get what you were trying to say. You maybe shouldn't have used some of the imagery that you did and some of the way, but also that was inherent to your story, and you couldn't really escape from that. So I get the pickle that you were in, Isayama, but that's one of the moments in the show where it's like, I don't know how to feel about this. So
it was moments you look at the author and you say, shh, sit down.
Yeah. Pretty much. But we got a couple more story moments here. Mikasa thanks the founder Ymir for the life she has created, even though she already caused the death of so many people. But if she hadn't lived on, Mikasa would also not have been born, which was an interesting scene. Then we have basically a collage of final moments. We get a narration accompanying the final scenes on the show by Historia, at least partially. And boy, has her name ever been more appropriate in this context, where she says that Elia forms a military led by Jaegeris, which gains strength every day. And out of fear of reprisal from the survivors of humanity across the sea, the island shouts with one voice, if we win, we live. If we lose, we die. We have to fight to win. Even with the Titans gone, the conflict won't go away. Was that in the manga? Was that part of the extra pages that were added later on?
No, the tour around the world and Eldia continuing on the Jaegerist path were in the original ending. It was the tree scene that you saw where the big build-up and Eldia turning into a futuristic society only to get missiled back to the Stone Age. That was what was added.
Yeah. Okay. Because considering the Jaeger's troops in those scenes look like fucking Nazi soldiers, And since Party would be a stand-in for Japan, displaying the nationalist fearmongers as Nazis who keep the cycle of conflict going would be the complete antithesis to the nationalist tendencies Isayama is sometimes accused of, right? Because
absolutely. There's a whole lot of conflict about Isayama is this, Isayama is that, and I think ultimately what he was trying to convey that ended up coming across a little sloppy was that the imagery of the unavoidable imagery of parallels of the Eldians to the Jews becoming the Nazis was, in essence, a lazy / sloppy way of saying, humanity finds a way to hate others. There will always be conflict. You can save the world and conflict will not go away. I don't know what he was trying to say from that,
mm-hmm.
but it's certainly a choice to have an entire show devoted to, showing that people are people, and while our motivations may be different, we're all the same down below, to then also go, by the way, we all suck.
Yeah. I mean, it's close to reality if you want to
it's
interpret
absolutely. I just don't know what he was thinking or what he was going through. Like there's often theories drawn from the mental mindset of mangaka when they write their stories, and there's a lot to be questioned here, I think.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, I want to go into that specifically, that part of the story and about the discussion about the mangaka himself later in the form of an article that I was finally able to read that caused a bit of hubbub when it came out. But I think the main core, and we can talk about this when we talk about our general thoughts about the ending and about the series, is still Isayama showing up that cycle of violence and everything, and then maybe saying, hey, we're fucked if we don't overcome this. So maybe think of a way to overcome this, right? That's one of the core themes of this. Like, yes, we're all the same. Yes, we're doomed to repeat ourselves. But if you maybe focus on a couple of things and intentionally do things differently at some point, there might be hope for us. I'll get to that when I get to my final thoughts about this. But I feel like maybe that was what he was going for with this. But like you said, he handled it really sloppily in certain parts. So some of that message might have not come across, and didn't come across definitely for a lot of people. Some people completely interpreted it a completely different way, and also called him names. But yeah, I feel like in this final moment, especially the nationalist part, that he is maybe accused of trying to propagating and promoting is kind of completely rejected, like at least that accusation, because he says like, hey, this shit is bad what Parody is doing at this point, and leaning into its nationalist tendencies, and the good guys here, our heroes, are now diplomats that come to broker peace. So I feel like that is still a good thing, and that made me hopeful. And that's something I wanted to see from this show. What was a bit weird is one of the other things, and where we get into more of the sloppy territory again, where he's like, maybe love is the other big catalyst for horrible things we do. And in the real world and in the story, like Ymir did what King Fritz wanted out of love, maybe, or because she didn't know how to live differently. And because out of love for their friends and families, a lot of players in this story did atrocious things to other people. So that was one of the things where it was like, okay, sure, that makes sense to an extent. Like, love maybe begets revenge at certain points, and it did in this story. So maybe that was just a further statement of realities that he made in his version of the story of this cycle of violence that is very much a real thing in our world, of course. I already talked to John about this, but I feel like The Last of Us Part 2 especially also tried to tackle this topic in a very similar way, where it showed us a very specific perspective from our ostensible hero side of things, and then switched over to the side of the so-called villains to give us their perspective, and then trying to draw very clear parallels between those people and their experiences. And then showing us violence begets violence, hate begets hate, and so on, revenge, and so on, that cycle will forever continue until one of side or both sides wise up and try to come an understanding. And I feel like Isayama is doing the same thing here. So I like that. And then we get the moment that Jacob was already talking about that was in the extended pages. Like we get, or at least that comes next after this, we get Mikasa resting at their tree and thanking Eren for wrapping his scarf around her. And then we see time passing quicker and quicker. Mikasa with her family, then her death, then time progressing to a modern age, new strife, new wars, new destruction. And the ED song by Linked Horizon aptly stating, Die Geschichte wiederholt sich, history repeats itself. And thus ends a modern epic with a literal plane hitting a skyscraper. Subtle as usual, Attack on Titan. but also a boy standing in front of the tree at the very end, which begs the question, what do you guys make of the actual ending? Like, what does this final exclamation point and the boy in the future entering it ultimately stand for? The possibility of peace, a resurgence of titans, the everlasting repetition ad nauseum of the cycle of death and violence. Is there a bit of hope in here, or what do you say? How did you feel about that final moment of this show?
And that is the question for the ages. I am not certain how I feel about that ending. As meta commentary, it's pretty bog standard. You know, the cycle of violence continues unabated. It is a strange inclusion into a story that was about ultimately committing acts in the hope of a better future, to then we have obtained that better future, and at the very end say, by the way, it all goes to shit anyway, and it happens again. Because, you know, whether that right, whether that is in the form, and it's left up, you know, ambiguous if that, you know, the child coming across the tree is going to reignite titans in the world or find something else or whatever the heck it is. It is left ambiguous, and I think it was an ending addition that didn't need to be added. It's almost like taking a story and then having that guy in the back say, nobody lives in the end at the end of anything. You know, like, yeah, no shit. Everyone dies. That's how things end. Yeah, it's like, okay, yes, I understand. And this, I think, is the anime/manga version of that, in that everybody dies and things fall apart in the end. Like, congratulations, Isayama, you stated the obvious.
Yeah. I mean, it also doesn't do that. It doesn't take the happy end, quote unquote, away from our characters necessarily, at least, right? It's right. Like this happens very far in the future, things escalating again and everything turning to shit. It's probably Isayama didn't want to rest on saying, on this completely hopeful note, because this would go against what he stated over the entire series before, and he maybe wasn't content with being like, yeah, this is kind of not a Hollywood ending, but it is still going for this uplifting final note of, yes, we solved war, we solved conflict. And then he maybe looked at the outside world and the current state of it and was like, no, we didn't, we probably won't, because that's not who we are, at least not at this moment in time. So he maybe wasn't content with wrapping up the show as an ideal, but more of a state of the of the human state of mind currently, which is maybe what he wanted to express instead. So I can see why this was included. I also agree with you that I maybe didn't want this to be included, or if it was necessary, because in the context of the story and the focus being, for me at least, a lot on the characters, I would have been fine with this just being a somewhat sappy or not sappy happy ending, because it's not a complete happy ending. Like, a lot of people died, like our ostensible main character died and so on, did a lot of horrible shit. So there was enough grief in here to go around, but you know, it would have been fine with me to have like this, hey, okay, this is how these characters, how this particular story end. And like you said, the rest is obvious. Yeah, probably shit or things are gonna go to shit again. But maybe at least for these characters, it doesn't have to at this point, and this is how we wrap this up. So maybe Isayama, you know, his wish for once again underlining his central thesis or point, got the better of him here. In contrast to what maybe the story needed at the end, but I still don't hate it because again, it doesn't fly in the face of what he was saying earlier with this series and with what he was doing there, in my opinion. John, you have said that you are not content with this. Was this your main holdup about specifically how that part of the story wrapped up, how the final moments of the show, or was there other stuff that grinded your gears or that didn't work for you?
I mean, I guess that's part of it, but also I think it's a little hard to explain, but a lot of the story that was specific to most of the characters kind of circled around trying to break this cycle, especially with like the Eldians and the Titan power and this, and they made it, very clear that this is a cycle. And this is going to happen, and it's going to keep happening unless we do something. But it didn't seem to me like sure they were able to do that, but in the end, it seemed like everyone was still kind of chained to their fate in a way. Because I sort of had this feeling like, oh well, they're gonna maybe it won't be like the happiest of endings. Sure, fine. This is not that sort of story, but. I don't know. It just didn't really come together for me after all of that. And then, with that little extra piece during the credit sequence as well, it's like, what are you... I was just like, all right, sure, dude, fine. But what are you really trying to go at with like all of this as a whole? And I don't know. It just didn't really do it for me.
Would you have felt better about it if that final credit scene wasn't included? Would that have made a better exclamation point at the end there with you? Just Mikasa maybe sitting at the tree and saying goodbye to Eren, the scene with the bird and the scarf, and this being like the final moments of the show?
Yes, a little bit.
Okay.
I'm not sure what exactly else, because it's hard to really pin it down for me. Like, I don't think I hate the way this ended, but in the same note, I'm also sort of like,
it's lacking something. It's lacking something that you were hoping to get from this specifically, and that would be, I don't know, put a bow, I guess, on the characters or on the character arcs that it didn't give you, right? It left it maybe too ambiguous, or I mean, I get it. I maybe would have liked a longer epilogue for some of the characters, right, to see more of their life afterwards. That would be something I could have seen just because we spend so much time with these characters. So
I mean, the past 10 years.
Yeah, so that's something. But also maybe I get to that when I get to my final thoughts about the show as a complete entity. But yeah, maybe that's something that should have been included. Any more thoughts on the ending specifically before we go into a little article I want to quickly talk about, and then after that our final summary thoughts about the entire series as a whole and how we feel about it, our general thoughts on our experiences with the show?
No, I have nothing to add about the ending.
Yeah, okay.
I think I'm good.
Good. Then let's get into it. The article I am referring to was one written on Polygon by Tom Spielman, The Fascist Subtext of Attack on Titan Can't Go Overlooked, which at that point when it came out, I didn't read because it was spoiling stuff from late manga chapters already way into the final season story. But I was interested, especially because of this particular topic and because I didn't know any of the stuff that was directed at Isayama and didn't know anything about this person really at that point, where it's like, okay, why does this even come up? Because I wasn't following the manga discussion, everything where this was already maybe talked about longer. And in the anime, there was some imagery in there and stuff, but I was still like, okay, I don't know what this article is actually going to address. So I wanted to tackle this now and give my 2 cents on that. There is a quote in here. Tom Spielman writes, "For another, military might is presented as the strongest, truest power of all. This goes far and beyond the typical theme in Japanese action media of the group of friends banding together, doing their best and changing the world. Frequently, the military, particularly the Survey Corps that Eren and the rest of the main cast belong to, is presented as full of pure rational decision makers and unquestioned commanders. The clearly unhinged soldiers like Titan researcher Zoe Hanji and the goofball Sasha Blaus are mocked, but the certitude that they should lead is never interrogated. I feel like this is, and Tom Spearman wrote this when the manga was not completely wrapped up yet, so there is some problems with that, because I feel like a lot of the statements the show makes in rejection of a lot of what he says in the article come into final chapters of the story. But this is already partially subverted by the time we get to the third season, because the series heavily criticizes young people being thrown into the war apparatus to use them as cannon fodder for the governing and corrupt institutions run by old people, to stay in power or cling to ancient skewed ideals or whatever. And by the time the series has reached its conclusion, it has made several in-your-face statements about how war and military might is bad. So I don't know how you could come to this ridiculous conclusion even at the time the review was written and where anime and manga were at that point in the story. Or were these statements not as direct in the manga when compared to the anime? Jacob, do you know? Like, was Isayama less direct with that in the story parts of, that relate to the third season of the anime and everything? I mean, Gabi is there to show us exactly the same narrow-minded, military indoctrinated view that Eren has been regurgitating from the get-go. People only hated her because she was not our main character and part of the faction, the show had painted as the enemy up until that moment.
So a lot of what I feel that drove that article has been and continues to be an ongoing issue and I don't even know if I should be neutral about this or not, but an ongoing issue in media literacy and opinions on depiction, because there's kind of a current going on in which the belief that depiction is definitively equal to endorsement, that by depicting an action, you are endorsing the action, that there is no ability to depict an action and have the reader understand that this is bad. So you run into this, and this mostly started coming up with the tonal change that in the anime sense, fourth season, but when Marley was finally revealed and we got to see more of that, the parallels of the Jews being in the ghettos under the Nazi heel is unavoidable. It is, subtlety is not Isayama's strong suit, and so it is unavoidable. And I think the pitfall that the author fell in is that they saw that and immediately went with, well, Marley's the bad guys and we're going that way, but now they're the good guys. So he's showing good guys as the Nazis and he's having them wipe out the aliens. This is bad, yada, yada. So it gets really muddied in that if you actually watch the show, and in this case, follow Gabby's character development and whole arc in that she is indoctrinated, is led to believe that the people on the other side of the water are literally demons, and having her realize that she has been lied to her whole life. There are just people over there, people with their own issues, people who, despite Gabby feeling justified in her anger at them, have their own justified anger in reverse. And having the growth from there where, you have to depict someone being in that situation to tell that story. Well, if you are of the opinion that depiction is endorsement, a lot of that what is actually subtle storytelling goes away and turns into, look, he's drawing Nazis. And some of that article, unfortunately, became a little bit of a cultural flashpoint, yeah. To put it lightly.
It was hard for me to ignore it because there was such a big buzz around it.
Right.
But I was like, no, I want to have an informed view on this, at least from the story perspective, and I don't want to spoil myself, so this had to wait until now. But yeah. It absolutely was. But
yeah, in short, whether the article was pure clickbait or whether the article was driven by a potentially misguided worldview, or whether it was put forward by someone who really wasn't paying as close attention as they thought they were, or maybe should have been. I don't know. Considering that discussion, for the most part, went away once the ending hit and we had something else to discuss in terms of the line. I think kind of settled that debate in a way that it was no longer necessary to discuss. But the parallels, as we've said, are unavoidably present.
I feel like a lot of that, I mean, I'm not that deep into the meme space and everything, but, you know, I feel like that is still being joked about. Not what the article is stating, but that Attack on Titan is leaning into a certain direction with its imagery and everything, and Isayama being maybe the root cause of that, and, you know, Attack on Titan being the outright favorites manga, whatever meme. So I feel like the discussion has not completely disappeared. Like, there's just no discussion. Like, one side has settled on the one view and the other side has settled on the other view, I guess. So maybe that's the problem, and maybe why I wanted to also bring it up again. I feel like, especially if we go into the core issue you just mentioned, and what's maybe sparked this, especially, you know, with the Eldians being shorthand for Jews due to armbands, and on the other hand, the Jaegerists due to the uniforms being shorthand for Nazis. I mean, the problem, according to the article, is that the manga/show endorses the Jaegerists by making our main character Eren align with them, ignoring all the Gabi stuff later on. I think Tom Spearman falls, again, victim here to tackling this topic before the story was finished, like you said, that Whit kind of puts a bow on that discussion in a way, and also ignoring some of the heavily telegraphed signs the series had already dished out up to this point, that the Jaegerists and Eren are the bad guys in the story now. I mean, it hadn't put an ultimate exclamation point on that in the story at that point. Even John and I weren't 100% sure what the final statement would be when we got to this section of the final season. But again, you could already make some pretty good assumptions where the story might be going with all this. And by the end, it pretty clearly condemns the nationalist tendencies the Jaegerists exhibit. Yes, the armbands of the Eldians are obviously a direct reference to the Star of David armbands of the Jews subject to the Holocaust during the Second World War, and thus, through that visual shorthand, connecting the fate of the Jews from our real world during that time period to a fictional race that can transform into weapons of mass destruction, and whose upper echelon also guides the current-day politics of the world from the shadows, can definitely be considered a misguided choice at best, if not downright "look at what you're saying here, my dude" territory. But despite this, I'm willing to entertain or even accept the notion that Isayama only intended to use this as a visual shorthand for oppressed and abused people in general, because those armbands are such an iconic, recognizable image. Everyone who has learned about this dark chapter of especially my country's history would recognize this imagery and understand that the show is trying to convey that this is what these people are going through. So in my eyes, Isayama uses this imagery to evoke immediate sympathy and pity for the Eldians in the audience. Everyone is aware of the horrors of the Holocaust, unless you're an idiot or a right-wing Nazi nutjob or both. To be fair, the show does a real tightrope balancing act. We've talked about this, your unicycle analogy, when trying to both sides us with the perspective of the Malayans by way of Gabi and other characters, which is, in my opinion, the other big downside of using that particular shorthand in the context of the show and actual history. But again, I don't necessarily see a bad intention behind this. Just a very blunt and kind of lazy choice to quickly establish certain themes in your story and get a specific reaction from your audience. It's not great.
To jump in here a little briefly, I think the core issue is that Isayama was trying to tell a story that he was not capable, or at least using imagery that he was not capable of properly utilizing.
Yeah.
I think a better example of what he was going for would be the show or the movie Jojo Rabbit. Because it is a very similar setup to the Part 4 situation, in which, you know, you mentioned it, you know, Gabi is telling the side of the story for the Marleyans. It's important to remember Gabi is an Eldian, and so rather than it being told from the perspective of the Eldians, it is, or in the Jews, or, you know, Germany in this case, it is told from the perspective of a Hitler youth. And so a similar situation in Jojo Rabbit, where the perspective is of a kid who's part of the Hitler Youth, who is very gung-ho about Hitler to the point where Hitler is his imaginary friend that talks to him.
Yeah.
As all of what happens around him happens. And I think that was more masterfully done in depicting really awful things in an innocent package than Isayama did, in which he essentially grabbed it as window dressing and then wanted you to not think about it too much because it falls apart upon further inspection.
Absolutely. And also it helps Jojo Rabbit that it goes for a completely different tone. It's completely satirical, which Attack on Titan does, as we've mentioned, in certain comedic bits, where it just goes apeshit bonkers comedy show for a very short moment. But the rest of the show is very grim, feels very real, very gritty, very close to our history at some moments. So if you have that tone and then you bring in something like that, it will be hard for people to look past that, or for certain, from certain perspectives anyway. But yeah, it's not great, but it's also probably not as clear-cut vile as the article makes it out to be. So, I
think ultimately it was not evil, it was just sloppy.
Yeah. Absolutely. I would totally agree with that. John, would you too?
Yeah, like 100%. I think you both covered pretty much everything on that.
Okay. Just as a last point, I kind of also get where some of these, let's say, perspectives or interpretations come from, since Hajime Isayama has undeniably made some very iffy comments in the past. Like that the series was inspired by an incident where he was accosted by a large drunk foreign man at a cafe. If you apply that knowledge to the design of the mindless pure titans in the manga and show, it definitely reeks of acute xenophobic imagery that is being propagated here. I don't know if that was actually intention or if he was just working his own maybe traumatic experience into his manga and thought that would be it. But again, sloppily handled, not thinking of the wider context here. And that is definitely where it's like, when I read that, not a great look.
That I didn't realize.
Well, there you go, John. Makes you think. Another interesting bit the article uses to try to make its point is Isayama being a fanboy of the Japanese general Yoshifuro Akiyama. But in my opinion, that can be read two ways. On the one hand, that guy was apparently responsible for a lot of horrible shit during Japan's occupation of China and Korea. On the other hand, Akiyama apparently later deeply regretted his time and achievements in the military. Quoting from his Wikipedia article, "Today in Japan, Akiyama is widely recognized as a leftist who denounces conflict. Akiyama heavily regretted his time serving in the military and mourned the spirits of his subordinates and the victims during his military era for the rest of his life. Akiyama disliked the totalitarian flow Japan was gradually heading for and tried his best to hide his military achievements. After assuming the job of a junior high school principal, students and parents would often ask him to discuss the Russo-Japanese War and show off his military uniform of army general. However, Akiyama regretted his past and vehemently rejected these requests. Akiyama said that students are not soldiers and hoped to reduce military training within schools so kids could focus on education." And this kind of lines up perfectly with a lot of the statements made in Attack on Titan once it gets to actually outright criticizing the military and war machinery through its characters. Both Pixis and Erwin could be stand-ins for both an early and late life version of Akiyama. So this is not as clear-cut nationalist as the article makes it out to be in my eyes. What do you think?
Well, and I think to further the point you made at the very end there, less about Pixis and whatnot, but more in line with how Magath and I'm blanking Keith. How their end was in Attack on Titan, in which you had Magath who drove the children over in Marley to be warriors and into combat, and you had Keith training up anti-Titan soldiers inside of, at that point, the walls, but in what is we would call Eldia now. They both came to realize that they just wanted the kids under them to have been happy and would have loved nothing more than if this conflict never existed and they could have just lived happy lives as innocent kids. And I think, to your point there, bringing up that there might be some parallels there, I think there is something to be said about that, especially in having those two, grizzled war veterans basically come together and work together and find an understanding just through, we have both done something we wish we didn't need to do and would have loved nothing more than this to have never been an issue. I think definitely is a parallel there.
Mm.
Yeah, I would agree. And of course, we're not trying to generally excuse Isayama's potential beliefs or choices of plot devices. We're just trying to show up some other perspectives to the points of critique discussed in the article. And we might as well be just wrong in certain parts. Like, this is a review, so we're only dealing in opinions here. Hopefully somewhat informed, but you, dear listener, be the judge of that.
I think ultimately, with as sloppy of a storyteller as Isayama could be, it is just as hard to draw conclusions about what he was actually thinking, because you ultimately cannot figure out if this is what he actually feels or if his message was just muddied through sloppy writing or sloppy parallels.
Yes, unless he decides at some point in the future to actually tell us, and I dread that moment. But anyway.
Oh yeah, he could absolutely pull a she who must not be named and just totally torpedo all debate.
Yes. Well, I'm trying to just not look up the name Isayama from that moment on, because I'm let's say somewhat content with the status quo on his character. Two pieces of writing that look at this discussion and its historical context as well as current day context more extensively, that you should maybe want to read, dear listener, is the Vice article, Everyone Loves Attack on Titan, So Why Does Everyone Hate Attack on Titan by Gita Jackson, and the blog post, The Possible Disturbing Dissonance Between Hajime Isayama's Beliefs and Attack on Titan's Themes by Seldom Musings. I will link those in the episode description and highly recommend you reading them to make up your own mind about the issues the show and author might or might not have. So, with all that being said, what do you guys, John and Jacob, think was this story ultimately about? What are your general thoughts about the series as a whole? Did you enjoy your time with it overall? Do you regret in any way having stuck with it till the end? What kind of, if you want to give it a grade, what grade would you give it? We don't have to, but if you want, you can. Like, what are your general feelings about Attack on Titan as an anime, as a series, as a decade-spanning story, as a modern epic? How do you feel about it?
At the end of the day, it takes a lot for me to regret something. There have definitely been pieces of media in which I have regretted it after the fact. And Lord knows we have a mutual friend who has had that happen as well. To where, even at the heat death of the universe, they will still be mad.
Probably, yeah.
I would say I am not entirely happy with the ending, but I am happy with the conclusion, if that makes sense. In that Attack on Titan was never a deep show. It was very much a vibe-based show, with pit of the stomach, dread,
a very
underscored
loud
by
show.
Yep, underscored by Sawano's score. And so I think to that end, it was fantastic, an absolute ride from beginning to end. I don't think it would win any awards if we were to hold an award show. It's, it was very much a bombastic visual spectacle, as many shonen stories are. So yeah, ultimately I would say I'm not super crazy about the ending, but I love the ride. And so, absolute 9 out of 10 for me.
Nice. John, how do you feel about it?
So, man, I kind of stepped into this a little wary at first when it was first on, just because I was like not really sure what it was all about, what all the commotion was, and I had heard there was some stuff with, like, I guess it's fair to say parts of the story deal with a little bit of body horror. So I was just sort of like, but I stuck with it because I thought, at the beginning, the characters are all really interesting, and that we had, this build up to this mystery with the basement, and that's what kind of kept me going. And then beyond that, and the show, it just got weird after that, man. And I didn't dislike it, but I sort of thought the direction it went, taking into consideration all the things we just talked about and all of the parallels you can make to other things, I don't know. I'm not entirely certain this show knows what it wanted to be at the end of all things. So I don't know if that really kills my enjoyment of it overall, but at the end, it leaves me a little confused. But it's not to say I didn't enjoy, what I saw out of it. So I don't know if I'd give it a 9, maybe a 7.5 or an 8 in that range. But certainly I don't think this was the worst piece of anime that I've watched there. Oh no, there are much worse out there. So I don't think you can go wrong with this show, but it's fair if at the end you sort of tilt your head and say, hey, hold on a second. And you have some questions and opinions of your own, because there are definitely things to ask and discuss with this show.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you don't need to make up your mind now. And nobody says that if we revisit the show like in I don't know how many years and then maybe get a completely different opinion on it because of changed subtext in regards to the author or in regards to what it depicts in relation to actual history or whatever. So is this just a picture of the current day John opinion? So
I mean, death of the author and blah, blah, blah. And so, sure, maybe my opinion will change in a decade. I don't.
And it doesn't have to. Don't get me wrong.
I don't really think so, but we'll see.
But that's totally fine and also absolutely valid. So, for myself, I just was glad that the forget instead of forgive message that I felt was bubbling under the surface for a while there didn't turn out to be the final statement of the show. At least I don't think it is. And let's not forget that this is one of those few generational shows that basically kicked off the streaming age for anime, for better or worse. But yeah, I for myself am overall satisfied, since I feel this is an appropriate ending. Yeah, it's grim and nihilistic, and the timeline stuff is definitely wonky at best. But this is not a Game of Thrones Season 8 situation, which, considering the expectations, is a good comparison to draw, in my opinion.
Well, so on that note, for the perpetually online with Reddit, Season 8 or some other thing with Game of Thrones had triggered the Free Folk shitposting subreddit. There was a parallel one for Attack on Titan that was called Titan Folk, and I would say Lobotomy Kaisen is the natural progression of those. So just to show you where the mindset was for things, there were more parallels than you might think.
I'm not surprised, but I feel like this is a different situation, at least in terms of base satisfaction with how it wrapped up and how the trajectory and course of the show was during its runtime, and by the end it reached its conclusion. Like we talked about the sometimes sloppily handled writing of Isayama and how that manifested in the show, but if you want to see sloppy writing, holy shit, just check out the first couple of seasons of Game of Thrones and then the last one. You will be surprised, and not pleasantly. But yeah, we mostly get a couple of scenes that take place 3 years after the Battle of Heaven and Earth, but a lot of the immediate future of our main cast is left up for speculation. So I would, like I said, have had maybe, or would have liked a longer epilogue to be a bit more satisfied with everything. But not everything needs a super nice bow and showing everyone living out a happy life. And I mean, we get that from Mikasa in a way. I guess my mixed feelings about the ending and about the series in general stem from mostly me not wanting to let go of this world and characters yet, and maybe just hoping for an overall more hopeful, uplifting ending, which, considering what the show had done with its story before this finale, was just really wishful thinking on my part anyway, I guess. But that's just me. I want to be a hopeful guy in the face of all the soul-crushing shit that real life throws in our faces every day, so I like my soul-crushing media with a bit of positive outlook in its conclusions. Which this isn't at all, at least by its final moment. It's a deeply cynical and sadly very realistic statement about how human history will always repeat itself and the cycle will never end, which is a downer for sure. But I guess the show also poses that there is enough beauty in the little moments and the connections we share with other people that the whole mess is worth it. And maybe, just maybe, one day we are able to overcome this vicious cycle if we find a genuine, widespread human connection that maybe also the founder Ymir was longing for. Very unlikely, yes, but a nice idea to cling to in those moments where we dread the future, of which there are plenty these days. So that's my thoughts, extended thoughts toward the ending. As it goes for the show itself, I enjoyed my time with it from beginning to end. Like the moment I laid my eyes on this show, even with all its standard shonen tropes and everything, it felt so unique. It felt so different in a lot of its aspects and how it handled its story progression and how it handled its big moments. And I was always on the edge of my seat. I maybe raised my brow at some of the story developments at first, but then I was very much quickly getting on board with it. It was like, oh, interesting. Where is this going? Where is this going? Oh, I want to know. I want to see. I want to know everything there is to know about this and what they're trying to do with the story. And that didn't change until the very end. I was just in it. I was on board for the entirety of the show. And I'm glad that the show didn't completely ruin my investment by the end. Quite the contrary, actually. I didn't feel completely happy with the ending, just like Jacob, and John felt even more unhappy with the final resolution. But it didn't like completely destroy the show for me and my experience with the show for me. And I can still look back on it and feel like, yeah, this was a ride this was a journey worth taking, and it showed me some interesting characters, some interesting plots, some interesting vistas in the show. It was an amazing looking show for a lot of its runtime, and I feel like I saw something that I had never seen before, and that always showed me new perspectives and new interesting ways to tackle certain themes and topics, sometimes very sloppily, but always in a kind of interesting way. And for that, I cannot reject it or resent it, and I'm very grateful to have experienced it. It's not a 10 out of 10, and it probably won't make my best of the season for this season, because, like I said, some problems with the ending and the sloppy writing in certain parts. But it's definitely bordering between 8 or 9 out of 10 for the entire series for me. Some moments in the series definitely going to the 10 out of 10 or 11 out of 10 score. So yeah, not just not the final moments there. But hey, that's fine. Hey, the more 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10 anime I can get, especially so long running ones, and by the once they wrap up, where I can say that, the happier I will be. John, where can people watch this gigantic show?
Where can't they? It's for sure on Crunchyroll. I think it's on Netflix. Hold on, I'm gonna fact check myself in real time.
Yes, here the hosts Google themselves. We don't have people for that.
Imagine. Oh. Yeah, if you are in America, it's on Crunchyroll. It's okay, live chart is showing like a laundry list of services. You can find it. It exists.
If you have one of the current day streaming services in your country, it probably will have Attack on Titan.
Yes.
That's good to know. Yeah, before we head out of this review, I want to say big thanks to Jacob for joining us. I feel like this was a very vivid discussion, and I enjoyed it very much. And I think we tackled a lot of interesting talking points. I hope you had a good time for the first time on our show. Maybe not the last time. Who knows? We'll see. But yeah, thanks very much for joining us in this review of the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
If you, dear listener, for some reason have listened this far and haven't watched Attack on Titan yourself yet, please do so. It's an incredible show that, even with all its grand ambition, manages to mostly stick the landing. It has lots of riveting action, complex characters, spellbinding animation, gripping drama, and a compelling story. If you skip this, you're definitely missing out on one of the must-see anime of all time, so please get to it. And thus, we have reached the end of the series, of this review, and almost of this episode. But there's still one little thing we have to do. Best of the season! Alright, best of the season time, as usual. Pretty packed season, John.
Yeah, a bit.
Yeah, I don't even know where to start. Okay, so I know what's not gonna make best of the season this time, which is Spy Family Season 3. I liked this season a lot. I think it was fun, but we've talked about it extensively. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm waiting for the plot to get going, and this season didn't have that. So, and I think we already had given Spy Family best of the season in some season. Yes, the first season in spring 2022.
Right, yeah.
So I'm fine with that. Same goes for Ancient Magus Bride, which I also really enjoyed a lot this season. Didn't have much to complain here. But hey, there are a bunch of other cool shows that we watched, and I already gave Ancient Magus Bride, or both of us, I don't, wait, let me check.
At least one of us
yes,
did.
Definitely. Gave that best of... Yes, Winter 2018. That was my pick. Ha! Yours was A Place Further Than the Universe. So there you go.
Oh, man. Oh, man.
So that works. So we just talked about that as well quickly. So yeah, so I don't need to pick it this season. It's got its rewards, its award back in the day. That doesn't mean that this season wasn't great, which it was, and I'm looking forward to more, which will probably take just as long to appear.
Well, yeah, because they're basically current with the manga, right?
Yeah, sadly. But what can you do?
Which, that's fine.
Yes. So, what that leaves me personally with are, the Jujutsu Kaisen, Overtake, Pluto, Zone 100, and Attack on Titan, which are a lot of great shows. Again, for Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2, I already picked Jujutsu Kaisen Season 1 for Winter 2021. So, even though I think the season really, really kicked my ass.
Yeah, no, this season of Jujutsu Kaisen was crazy.
Something else, yeah. And
it was explosive.
Literally bursting at the seams, and there's like this bad aftertaste because of the MAPPA stuff, and which is also maybe a reason why I wouldn't want to give it the award, even though that kind of feels like it does a disservice to the people who actually poured their soul into this and make this work despite the circumstances. But still, season 1 already got this award, and it was like, yeah, all right, that's fine. But again, what a fantastic season of shonen anime. Just incredible looking. Action back to back. Fantastic action scenes. And just immense scale and a huge change of the status quo. And I can't wait to see where it goes next. So definitely looking forward to that. Overtake, really enjoyed it. Really fun little closed off storyline about racing cars and everything. I read family drama a bit here and there, sports anime a bit here and there. I really enjoyed it. I thought, overcoming trauma and everything. And I thought that show had a lot to offer. I really enjoyed that. Mm-hmm. This was probably my top contender next to the other two. It's tough. I still think it's not gonna take over the other two we talked about, and of those, Pluto and Attack on Titan, I'm probably gonna pick Pluto. The reason is because we already picked Attack on Titan so many times. It would probably be fair to put it in here again, but also I had an issue with some of the ways this wrapped up. It was better than in the manga, I guess, and we just talked about that. So I won't go into details again. But there were some parts in this finale where I was like, I don't know if I like what you're saying with this. And I don't know if I like where you're going with this. And I don't know if I like necessarily the actual end point of the story for our characters and everything. So it is, I guess, all things considered, it is a good finale, especially considering how the show changed and where it went and everything. But It's
especially considering they actually got to the finale.
Yeah, exactly. But is it as good as other seasons of this show? I don't think so. I think it's a good blockbuster finale, and it's probably as good of an end as we could have gotten for this kind of ridiculous story, and all the different ways that or directions that it went in, and how long it was running and everything. It's still a satisfying finale in a way, but it's also not the best the show has been. So that's where I end up. I'm left with Pluto, which was kind of becoming pretty clear that this would be the winner pretty quickly in regards to just this being a little miracle show, waiting for this for so long, and then this turning out the way it did with the production values that it did, and being just such a great adaptation of the source material, just really handled really well by kind of the second incarnation of Mappa, I guess. Doing everything that I wanted to do, doing a bit more here and there, looking fantastic doing it, sounding fantastic. I wish it would have gotten more recognition, but that's what you get for making a deal with the devil, aka Netflix. So, although even if that didn't exist, I don't know how much money Netflix have put into this project. So maybe then it wouldn't have happened on the scale that it did. So I'm really glad to finally get another work of Naoki Urasawa on the animated screen, and looking the way it did, being handled the way it did, and just being overall fantastic. It spurred me on to fucking check out more Astro Boy stuff, and I'm gonna watch the 2003 show. I got that. I acquired that already, and I'm gonna check that out from beginning to end. Really interested.
I always wanted to watch the 03 version. I just never got around to it.
Yeah, it was really hard to get to because there was only like the weird Hong Kong DVD stuff of rips of it, and also the other stuff was the 4Kids version, everything, and there was really a full version of the Japanese thing, and now I think that exists. At least I think that's what I have. So I will check that out, spurred on by Pluto again. Of course, Pluto is a completely different beast and, much darker than actual Astro Boy. But still, that got me interested in that universe again. So I'm going to check it out. And I urge everyone to check out Pluto because it's just a goddamn great show. Like I said, a bit more deliberate pacing than you're probably used to from most of your anime stuff, especially action anime, which just kind of isn't. It's a procedural, it's a murder mystery. So it is intentionally slow and character focused and dialogue focused, but I dug it a lot because usually we don't get something like that, and if we get something like that, not with these production values. So absolutely, hey, if you have a Netflix subscription, check it out. Definitely, if you don't, maybe try to get it somewhere else. It is worth it. It's a fantastic show, and yes, please, everyone watch Pluto. It's a little miracle, and I'm glad that it exists. John, what is your pick for best of the season?
Well, ruling out everything you already said, that leaves me with Overtake and Helk. And I liked Overtake because it was, the points you laid out. And it was compared to a lot of the other stuff this season, it was a lot more of a grounded, real story.
Absolutely. Yeah, it felt very, very real world-ish, and hey, that could happen maybe to a person I don't know. So
yeah, and I appreciate a story like that every now and again.
Yes,
because obviously you watch this stuff to try and escape the awful world around us.
Yes.
But I really enjoyed Helk. I don't want to go into detail again for its subversion of the plot that was presented to us, and what what it was trying to do with its turn later on. And unfortunately, it is not a complete story in anime form. So,
but it will become one, right?
Please give us some more of it, Satellite. Even though Satellite is a smaller studio, so I get it. So I feel like if we could have seen Helk's story all the way through, I'd probably give it to it. So I think I'll probably, by virtue of that, give it to Overtake. So Helk can potentially have its chance again. But I really liked both of them a lot, though.
I get it.
And, all the other stuff we had talked about and given the awards to. So, they're all still great except for parts of Attack on Titan.
Mm-hmm.
But all of these shows this season were also really we had a great season.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't feel like we've had like a really
no stinkers.
Yeah, I don't feel like we've had that in a minute.
Yeah, I mean, it might not come across this way on the podcast because these days we tend to not review the shows that really sucked, right? We just drop these at some point, and maybe we talk about it in the Quick and the Dead. But just in terms of being really, just giving out glowing reviews for almost every show that we watched, you're right. It's like it's one of the seasons where last season last couple of seasons we didn't watch as much as we watched this season or reviewed this season, and all of the shows we reviewed were in one way or another fun, great, entertaining, super enjoyable, and different and special. So. Yeah, fantastic season in my opinion. Like, couldn't be happier with it.
It was a fun time, and I think which is funny because I think at least for me, next season is going to be a lot later.
I haven't checked out yet what there will be, and in terms of reviews, we'll still need to check out what we're actually gonna review.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean in terms of reviews.
Yes, we will.
In terms of shows airing in spring, I have to make. I think I have to make a lot of cuts.
Yeah, we'll see. I have a couple of candidates that I'm really interested in, but we'll see how much actually turns out. Yeah, I guess that's it for Best of the Season then. Okay, our picks then are Pluto and Overtake this time around. And yeah, definitely check out these shows, but also check out all the other ones because like we just said, it was a pretty damn good season. Check out all the ones that we reviewed, and I think you will have a good time with at least one of them, if not all of them. We will return very soon because we had to record this episode a bit later to include Jacob. That's why it's probably the premieres have already aired at this point, so it's not going to be too long until we get back to you. And so until then, enjoy springtime if you can, and watch it.
We're finally getting out of winter with this one, boys.
Yes. Watch the allergies. And that is a wrap on the 155th episode of Anime Brain Freeze. All the music in this podcast is from the Double Dragon Neon soundtrack by the amazing Jack Kaufman. Please go to vrrt.bandcamp.com and check out his awesome work. Our show is available on most of the popular podcast services, but it's always worth visiting animebrainfreeze.com for our review index and more. Leave us comments and questions on YouTube, follow us on Twitter at AnyBrainFreeze, or send an email to animebrainfreeze@gmail.com. We would love to read your feedback. Thanks for tuning in, we hope you had a good time, and please join us again on our next episode. Macht's gut.
Take care, everybody. Next time on Anime Brain Freeze.
Bang like you've never banged before.
And let your bravery explode!